I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of your responsibilities, but if that becomes the purpose of your life, it's like that's not enough. There's no way you're gonna dry up, And so being worried about the money that's coming in, or being worried about your bills and being worried about these things. Not that you should be responsible, you should be, but that's not a way to live.
Just slate it. Yeah, so how many times do you get stopped? Are we ready?
Yeah.
How many times do you get stopped now because of...
It's weird. It depends where I am. Where I am in Montreal, nobody stops me. Nobody knows me in Montreal. It's actually nice.
Yeah.
It's actually nice. But then the further I go south in the United States, the more I'll get recognized.
Interesting.
If I go to Texas, I'll get recognized a few times a day, And so it's kind of funny.
Why do you think that is?
I mean,
Texas,
I think just the South is more conservative. There's a real kind of Christian revival, I think, happening in the South, in the Orthodox churches for sure. It's people don't know what to do. They just build these new parishes, and now they're already bursting at the seams. So there's this wild thing going on.
Yeah, what's going on in Orthodoxy? Why is it exploding?
Well,
is it exploding? That's the impression I get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a double movement. I think that the cradle Orthodox are still leaking out, just like they've always been. So the people coming in, they lose their kids to the culture. But there's definitely a wave of converts. And now we know, because at first we were just going on hearsay and asking priests and stuff. But now there's been some people have done some of the studies to see that it's actually happening, and it's young men mostly that are coming in. My parish has tripled since COVID, and it's the same thing that's happening everywhere. It's mostly kind of young men coming in, intelligent young men, educated, looking for meaning. You usually have the idea that people who end up in the church, usually like they hit rock bottom and then they have like a kind of spiritual. These are not the same kinds of people. It's people that are really feel more like they're wandering and hopeless, and they're looking for something solid to stand on. So that's the sense I get,
Yeah, and I've said this before on my shows, but like the curb appeal of Orthodoxy is pretty impressive because it feels like, and I don't know if this is because Orthodoxy has often been ethnic in the United States. I know that's changing rapidly. But there's a kind of a lure or a mystery about it that we thought was a good idea to get rid of as Catholics.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible idea. And I'm not saying we've done that wholesale, but in many places we have. And so I think people, they want mystery, they want beauty, they want their desire for the divine to be taken with great seriousness. And when I look at Orthodoxy from the outside, that's the sense I get.
Well, I think a way to understand it too is we have to see it like, for the past 100 years maybe, the different Catholic churches and Protestant churches, they've been trying to keep people in. And they had this idea that to do that, we have to just adapt to the world as much as possible to make sure that people don't go out and don't leave. So, let's reduce the ritual, let's reduce the formality, let's have the guitar, and let's have kind of disco ambiance for the mass, trying to keep people in. The thing is that once people have actually left, those that are coming back, why would they want that?
Yeah.
Like they want the real thing. The people coming back, they want, like, well, if I'm going to become a Christian, I really want to be a Christian. And so I think there's part of that too. The converts, you see that both in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, the converts tend to move towards more traditional forms because they're like, well, I already have concerts and entertainment.
And it's way better than the crap y'all are playing.
Exactly. So if I'm going to go for this, I want the real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, people often make a distinction nowadays between Vatican II and the spirit of Vatican II. And Vatican II documents, I think, are very beautiful. I think there were a couple of ambiguities that have been sorted out. But this spirit, if you want to kind of frame it in different ways, but maybe us kind of chasing after the world, we need to kill that. We need to stop that. That was a very bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But it seems like when the boomers are gone, it's just naturally going to return because it's really their generation. It's really their culture. They fought for all of the libertine aspects of our society. Yeah. And so they got them. Now we have them. And now their grandchildren that are being raised in complete, freedom to get anything you want, anytime you want. Now they want meaning. So. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want some scotch on
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
Josiah, everything good? Do you mind? I think you should probably turn that down a little bit. It sounds quite loud. Okay, then don't worry. What do you think? So there was a big...
Cheers.
Yes, cheers. It's really great to meet you.
It is great to meet you.
Do you like scotch or whiskey? Or?
Yes, I do. Nice.
There was a big kind of wave of Protestant converts into Catholicism in the 80s and 90s and early aughts. And we often, it was beautiful, and they brought a lot of life into the church and things like that. But undoubtedly, and I need to ask one of them about this, like, what baggage did you bring in?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not a Catholic, so like, what did you overlook?
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about how beautiful our liturgy is, but I mean, you probably didn't really have much of a liturgy where you came from, many of them, not all of them. So therefore, like, how did that impact the church in a negative way, even if it was an overall boon? And my question for you is, what is it going to look like when Orthodoxy is predominantly American?
Yeah.
Or Western?
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. For sure, there are going to be conflicts that are going to appear. There's a Puritan spirit in America that is very Anglo-Saxon, and so when that Puritan spirit enters into the church, you have kind of lay Athonite, monastic attitude, where I think traditional Orthodoxy tended to move from the monastic, very, very, let's say, rigorous, down into a more, I wouldn't say casual, but let's say a more implemented form of tradition and so we don't have, for example, in the Orthodox Church, we don't have like orders, and we don't have all these different types of practice. We just have one. But then it's just applied differently depending on the level that you want to participate in, right? So ultimately, we should all be praying 24 hours a day, doing night vigil service, and everything. But then in reality, it ends up being mitigated in the life of the church. And so I think that there is, when some Protestants come with that kind of zeal, that Puritan zeal, they tend to approach the church with that attitude. It's like, I want to get it all right. I want it to be pure. I want it to be, exactly the way that it should be. That's definitely a danger. And the other extreme danger, which would be the more kind of, let's say, charismatic side of American religion, would be a more wishy-washy, kind of sentimental version of Orthodoxy. The one thing that I think is actually wonderful coming from Protestantism that will help the Orthodox in America is the Bible, because in the old world, people are just soaking right in the culture of Christianity. And so this idea that you would need something like Sunday school or like explicit, teaching schools for lay people was not that big of a deal, because you just lived in it. Everything about your life, the festivals, everything was just soaking. Whereas when you come to America, you kind of need to know a little more. Also because you're faced with people that don't believe the same things you do. You're faced with all these things. And so I think that kind of Bible study mentality of the Protestants, right? The desire to actually really know the Bible very well, the Old Testament and the New Testament, I think is something that's actually positive that can come from Protestantism.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know what you think about this. What's that fella's name? Tim Marshall? What's his name? Tim Gordon. He had this line, he talked about the Miyagi complex, where these white dudes without fathers go looking toward the east.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I don't know if that was his original idea or not, but I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
That there's so much wisdom and beauty in the West, but it's like we forsake it for the sake of something maybe elusive. What do you think of that? It's not to say that there isn't wisdom to be had in the East.
No, I think that's possible. For sure, there are some. I mean, I remember when I became Orthodox, I had this idea, right? Read The Russian Pilgrim, had this whole idea of the Jesus prayer, and I was going to find the starets, and he was going to teach me the Jesus prayer. That doesn't really exist very much. Like it's not the reality of Orthodoxy. The reality of Orthodoxy is more like go to confession, and do your prayers and just live it in the everyday. So I think that there's definitely some of that. But at the same time, there's also a light. I do think there is a kind of light that comes from the East in terms of the mysticism. The mysticism, Eastern mysticism, has been really preserved in the life of the church. And so, right, the Jesus prayer is the spiritual practice of the Orthodox Christians. It's the same practice that leads to, the fullness of the vision of the divine light. But it's like, again, it's mitigated into the life of people. It's not encouraged that people do the prayer all the time. But what I mean is that there isn't this special space for the mystics, like, but it's really the whole church is mystical in its structure. And so I think that that's useful. I think that some of the fathers that are more prominent in the Eastern Church, like St. Maximus or St. Gregory of Nyssa, for example, I think that they're very useful for us now because they offer that fullness of vision. I think that even St. Maximus offers almost like technical problems to some of the issues we have today in terms of subject object, the problem of the place of consciousness, right, in the way that the reality unfolds. My friend John Vervaeke, who's a cognitive psychologist, has started reading some of these more mystical fathers, and he's seeing a lot of connection, in terms of how we talk about how reality unfolds. So at the same time, I think it's good. I think that this connection to the East will bring some freshness.
I don't know if you know this or not, but John Paul II wrote an encyclical called The Light of the East. Okay. Where he talked about the beauty of the Eastern Catholic traditions and what we've received from Orthodoxy, perhaps. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but it's a great way to make everyone angry.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's beautiful. So you grew up a Protestant.
I grew up Baptist.
Baptist now in Montreal.
It's very weird. I'm a weird fellow. You might have noticed. My father was Catholic, so my parents were Catholic. Quebec was the most Catholic place in the world. Yeah. And then the 1960s and 70s happened.
Now I don't even want to say them, but aren't there like blasphemies about you said the tabernacle or something like this?
Oh yeah. Well, that was there when they were Catholic too. Like, oh yeah, the curses, all curses in Quebec are religious words, and so, but that's actually interesting. That has to do with the Catholic heritage.
Yeah, I guess so.
In some ways, it's the Catholic peasants.
It's the fact that it meant so much that it could then be used.
But it was used by the Catholics. Like, when Quebec was Catholic, that type of language was already part of like the peasant, the peasant world, right? Just like you say the dirty words, and even though it was like a Christian society, people would still say the dirty words. It's the same with the blasphemies. Like, people would use blasphemous words, and then they would have to go to confession and confess them. But it's mostly that the 60s and 70s happened, and we had this thing called the Quiet Revolution, where everybody just left the Catholic Church in one generation. It was pretty crazy, and it, I think part of it was the overbearing of the church before Vatican II, and then in some ways the kind of Vatican II opening up. All of those two things together seem to have been part of the fact that everybody was just like, well, you know what? Actually, if the things you told us before weren't actually real, then what's the point? And a lot of people left. So, and my parents, they also think the catechism was horrible. People just didn't know anything. So my parents really found Christ in the Protestant faith.
Wasn't the original Quebec flag, didn't it have the Sacred Heart of Christ on it?
I don't know if it...
Josiah, can you look that up?
But for sure, it has the Quebec flag right now is like a cross with four fleurs-de-lis. Like, it's a Christian flag. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so they found Christ in a Baptist church.
Yeah, well, in a kind of a Protestant denomination.
Yep. Okay.
And
what's that?
It did.
Go me.
Yeah, you're
Canadian facts. That's my only fact. That and I like beaver tails. That's so wild. I mean, how sad, eh? How sad to go from...
Which one?
Hey, what is it? At the top left,
right there. Look at that. The Quebec flag history.
The Sacred Heart of our Lord on it.
Oh my goodness, it's so embarrassing.
Why?
I literally have that flag in my house. Someone gave it to me. Some like a Quebec Catholic nationalist person gave it to me, and I have it folded in my basement. That's horrible. Yeah. That I don't remember that. Awesome. But so they became Protestant, and I grew up. So my dad became a pastor. He was a Baptist pastor. So I grew up a pastor's kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that weird? Was it? I mean, I guess a lot of your friends probably were from this church as well, or no?
It was weird. It was weird because, on the one hand, I would say there was still a real hostility to Protestants in Quebec when my parents converted, and when I grew up. So I would get beat up and stuff in school because I was Baptist. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, definitely there was.
What sucks is there going to be people in the YouTube comment section being like, "That's based."
Yeah,
no, it's not. Stop punching up the little Baptist boy.
Exactly. And so I would get beat up in school, but it was all good. And then but I grew up in a Baptist, so I was like a Baptist in a Catholic world still. So everybody in school would still do like confirmation and all that, and First Communion. But I would be like, we went to something called morality class, because they still had Catholic teaching in the school. And then we went to this kind of morality class thing, which wasn't great. But then also the Catholic teaching wasn't great either. And then it just slowly diminished. And then the Catholic schools became French schools. They were taken out of the Catholic world and just became, and so it just slow secularization, kind of planned, like a kind of slow planned secularization. Yeah. And so, I grew up a pastor's kid until I was about 12 or 13. But it was nice.
Did you embrace Christianity?
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't rebel right away?
Not at all. No, I was really, as much as I remember, I was always a Christian. You know, I have this little moment. I remember, because when you're Protestant, you have to find the conversion moment. It was like really young. It was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old that I remember. But my father was really very bright. He's a very bright man, very curious, very
still
reads
a pastor?
A lot. No. He stopped being a pastor when I was 13.
Okay.
And went to Wheaton College and studied psychology at Wheaton College. And so, yeah, I guess then I was a psychologist kid, I guess, you know. But still involved in the church, still really involved. I grew up really involved I was like a youth leader and did all that stuff, and
wow.
wrote all these like plays for Protestant churches. And,
awesome.
yeah.
How old are you now?
So I am 49.
Yeah, so we're similar age.
Yeah,
I'm 40, I don't know, 2? 41, thank you.
41. Yeah, I'm still I'm kind of your elder, I would say.
But you know what's funny is, you are, but what's funny is because of the lag in the advancement of technology in Australia compared to North America, I find that my childhood looked similar to Americans in their 50s. Flip that top bit up first with your finger.
Okay, I was going to say.
Yeah. Does that make sense? So my wife, I mean, she's my age, but she's a year or two older, but, you know, she doesn't remember not having some kind of computer or something. Mm-hmm. Whereas the first time I used the internet, I was 15 or 16, 17, and no one had cell phones until about that time either. And so it's funny how all right. That's cool. So Protestant, beautiful, love Jesus, read the Bible.
Yeah,
You're going to need to torch that a bit more.
Yeah, probably.
And then, you like cigars?
I do. I don't smoke a lot. I smoke cigars maybe every few weeks. I don't know, every 3 weeks.
This is so delicious. It's funny when you get older, you start to, what? You gotta tell people what it is. What it is? Oh, yeah. Well, I'm smoking a Cuban, which wouldn't impress you because you're from Canada and can get them whenever you want. Yeah.
I'm smoking actual pints with Aquinas cigar. Look at that.
Yeah, notice it's the Eastern, what do you call it? The chasuble. What do you call it? What's the fancy Greek word for it or whatever?
I don't know.
Doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm calling you out.
I should know.
The Quebec flag.
Yeah, no, exactly. You just dropping knowledge here.
But that's what it was. The fella who put that together, it's a company, the cigars from Nicaragua, but the fella put pints with Aquinas and he kind of blended those things together.
It's nice.
You like it?
Yeah, I do like it.
I give you full permission to say you don't, if you don't. I love Cardinal Pell. He was a absolute lion of a man.
I don't know who that is.
Well, Australian cardinal who was faithful to his church, and the mainstream media hated him because he was opposed to contraception and abortion and things like this, and they absolutely villainized him and then accused him falsely of doing things for which he went to prison.
Whoa.
And then the Australian High Court eventually vindicated him fully.
Really?
And this is after he's been in prison, solitary confinement. He was absolutely mistreated, but and wrote these beautiful prison journals, and they're available for purchase. And I just love him. And
he's passed though?
Yeah. So I asked for his intercession, and yeah, that's what that is.
Oh, I didn't know about him. Yeah, it's weird for me. Like I'm in a strange position, right? Because, my ancestors were Catholic and then grew up Protestant. And, when I was in my 20s, I started to become interested in tradition and kind of understanding the role of tradition, not just really in terms of also an ontology, like understanding how Christianity is it's like a structure of being. It actually shows you the structure of being. And I was interested in church architecture and iconography and noticing how that was being shown in the imagery and in the music and all that. And I was obviously very impressed. And my first instinct would have been to become Catholic. That was my first instinct. But Like it's
Yeah.
not
Was there ever
not in Quebec. Like it's not
Really?
going to
Yeah,
happen.
Yeah. Has there ever been a part of you that thinks, like natural piety, right? Like having a fidelity to your ancestors and what's been bequeathed to you, which it doesn't sound like it was. So maybe that's the difference.
Well, the thing is, I grew up. I was not baptized
yeah.
Catholic.
So it was never your.
It didn't feel like it was my history. And also, I think I also have maybe not so secret hostility towards the French Canadians, because of the betrayal of their own history. And so I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, I love Quebec, but I also have this like, I'm just annoyed at how they, and the thing is too, is that the revolution, the quiet revolution, like it wasn't a revolution, it was a betrayal. That is, it came from the church. It's like, it was the clergy itself, which had accepted these crazy kind of Marxist style ideas and then started to integrate them in the church, only to be surprised that people
didn't want anything to do with it.
But that they were just going to leave, that was what, in some ways sometimes I wonder if some of them secretly thought that was normal, like a normal process of things. It's like, well, we're modern now and moving towards modernity and we have to shepherd these people.
Yeah, it's such a shame, isn't it?
So because of that, I looked into Latin Christianity. I was interested, I contacted people from the fraternity of St. Peter and these kinds of people. And it's just not much was going on, and my experience with people from the fraternity is that they're very
careful.
They're very
not from me, but from
very
everyone.
harsh.
Okay.
But you see that in some Orthodoxy as well. Like they're very harsh and they have a desire for like 19th century Catholicism.
What's weird is like when tradition comes to a crashing halt unnaturally, how do you pick it up again?
It's rough. And it's also, and one of the issues too is that there were two issues, like becoming Catholic for me when I was Protestant. One was the Catholic Church in Quebec was running full speed towards my position, right? They're basically like doing everything they could to be as Protestant as possible. And so it's like, why would I jump out of a boat into a boat that's coming in my direction? And then the other possibility was to become a Latin Catholic and then spend my life fighting a hierarchy, that I'm going to go into a church to become a rebel against that. I was like, all of this is just too much. And then, and then I fell in love with iconography and also read Vladimir Lossky's book on the mystical theology of the church and just was completely enamored by what he was describing. And it was just like, it just hit every note that I thought the world was like. I was like, this is exactly what it resonated deeply into what I thought the world was like. And and then one day I found someone who was Orthodox and went into a church, and that was it. It was a pre-sanctified liturgy, evening liturgy, during Lent, and with all the bowing and
Beautiful.
head on the floor. It was like, that was it.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know how much you keep abreast of these things, but tradition's on the rise again, obviously, in the West. People are, they're not interested in becoming Catholic for no reason. They're not interested in becoming priests for no reason. Like there's a lot of very good happening. I think it's interesting because I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
I became agnostic when I was 13 or something, and then had a conversion in Rome when I was 17 years old. But I wonder if it's difficult for converts. So I encounter converts to whatever, right? To Coptic Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, whatever. And then I see a lot of them bouncing around, like leaving and then going somewhere else. And then they think this is the answer, and then they get kind of whatever.
Disappointed.
They go somewhere else. And I just think I'm really grateful that I was raised Catholic, because I think there's just I feel stable. Like I look around, I see the mess, I see it. I'd be open, I've said this in the past, to the proposition that the Catholic Church is the most corrupt institution on the planet. Even now, I'm open to that.
Yeah.
But I love being Catholic. And I guess I also maybe know, and I'm sure you know this too, that like wherever you go, you're finding human beings who suck.
That's
including yourself.
Including yourself. That's right. Yeah, for sure.
That disillusionment, I think, is very common today among converts who are so sick of the bland materialism that isn't answering their deepest longings, they'll go somewhere for a little bit, and maybe they think it will initially, but then it doesn't satisfy. They bounce and bounce and bounce, and then it can become a game of like, how traditional can we get?
Yeah.
So what does that look like in the Orthodox Church?
Yeah, for sure. There are versions of that in the Orthodox tradition. You get people who become converts, and they go immediately to the most radical forms. They become old calendarists, or they become different, or they become schismatic groups within the Orthodox tradition. You see that happen, and this is what I think is that I think that rigor has a function, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with rigor. If you read some of the great saints, their lives were the most rigorous you've ever seen, and you read some of the modern saints, and some are more on the, let's say, kind of compassionate and open side, and then some are on the more rigorous side. And I think those two sides are necessary. And so I have deep sympathy for people who look for that rigor for themselves, like who is like, I want something, some discipline, something to help me stop sinning, something to help me, attach myself to Christ as much as possible. And I think that can be really beautiful, but what I always try, when I always try to maybe help the rigorists that are around me remember is that rigor's for yourself. It's like, it's for you. It's if you take that rigor that you apply to yourself, and then you start to just apply it to everybody else, then you're going to get in trouble, And so that's what I would say to that. Like I know people that are quite rigorous and that I admire immensely, And then I know some people that are quite rigorous, but live in a kind of anger against the world.
For sure, the most impressive people are the people who live rigorous lives, who are more compassionate than anybody else to the hooker or to the drug addict. Or to, whereas we're barking at everybody and expecting everybody to be the way we want them to be, when we can't even make ourselves be the way we want ourselves to be. But I see that in people I would consider and call saintly. Yeah, I see them there's a tremendous kindness that they have towards the poverty of others, but they're rigorous.
Yeah, that's right. I think you have the right image of what it is. There's stories. It's interesting because like we have Elder Ephraim now, who's become legendary in America, who set up all these monasteries, a Greek monk, and he was quite rigorous. His monasteries are very, very demanding. But the same, I hear other stories of Elder Ephraim where, he would just stay out for hours and hours hearing confessions from just people who came up, and just this completely generous spirit, And so, yeah, I think that's the right way to see it. Yeah.
So what is, because you talked about going into schism, what does that look like in Orthodoxy or schismatic groups within Orthodoxy?
Yeah. So you have,
And I know what that looks like in Catholicism, right? Because you're separating yourself from the authority of the Pope and those in communion with him. But like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's complicated. In the Orthodox Church, things are, for example, like there are schismatic groups in the Orthodox Church that I couldn't take communion with.
Okay. What Orthodox are you in?
I'm in the OCA, Orthodox Church of America, which is it's down the line from the Russian church, right? You know a bit the story, right?
A little bit, yep.
So we're in communion with the Patriarch. We're in communion with Moscow. We're in communion with.
So can you take communion at a Greek Orthodox church these days?
Yes, I can. Yeah, okay. The clergy can right now.
Can?
No, they can't.
Can't.
Yeah, because of the conflict between the Greeks and the Russians. But the conflict doesn't apply to the parishioners, and they try to keep that away. So there are different types of excommunion. There are some excommunions that are excommunion not for theological reasons. Sometimes they're for ecclesiastical reasons, and there are all these different reasons why there can be excommunication. And so, like, let's say an old calendarist, for example, like I don't think old calendarists are heretics, but because they didn't want to accept the new calendar, and there's maybe reason for that. I don't know, but they didn't, and now they've cut themselves away from.
Isn't that a lot of Orthodox or no?
It depends. No, it depends.
Because my mate, are these the people who celebrate Christmas and Easter at different times?
Yeah.
I remember figuring that out. I used to work as a cashier at a supermarket, and there was this lovely lady, Cindy, I think her name was. She was Greek Orthodox, and figuring out that she was celebrating Christmas or Easter later. I'm like, what?
A week later, yeah.
But I thought, okay, so I'm actually asking because I'm interested.
This get really complicated because it.
Yeah.
So the the calendar.
Are they considered more like traditional?
Yeah, they're more
Okay.
they're more traditional. It depends. Like I've met old calendarists that are, because also these things, when the schism happens, these things after that, it's like the next generation, that's what they grew up in. That's their church. That's
Right.
their,
They're not in
so
rebellion
they can
against
still be
anything.
like extremely, let's say generous of mind and exploratory, even though they're in this tradition and they continue in this tradition. They don't want to go back. So there are different versions. There's Greek. There are Greek churches that are old calendarists that are kind of schismatic from the rest of the Greek church, and then there are the Russian churches. Some of them are old calendarists, but they're not in schism. It's very complicated because it's a decentralized system. So I can say if I go to, let's say, a Rokor church, in theory, I should be able to take communion, even though many of the Rokor churches are old calendar.
Yep.
So it's especially in America, it's really complicated.
What about the old Russian believers? They fascinate me.
Yeah, I don't know. I know someone who grew up an old believer.
Yeah.
But
But do you find in Orthodoxy, this is what I'm pointing at and what we're getting at is something bigger than Orthodoxy, right? It's this desire for tradition in a time of modernity where we don't have roots anymore and want them. That's what we're doing here, right? And so I know in Catholicism that I see that, and I know the temptation towards it.
It'd be really weird to convert to like old believer.
Would it?
Orthodoxy.
People don't become like.
I think it probably exists, but I would find that it's like they're because it's so insular.
The prayer mats are cool. And then was it Listrovka? What's this called? The thing they have, the prayer rope.
The prayer rope. Yeah, we have that.
Yeah, but not the chotki, but the Listrovka maybe.
What does it look like?
Can you look up what a Listrovka? I'm butchering this. Hi everybody, Listrovka. No way, that's right. It's like a leather prayer rope with that triangle at the bottom. It means ladder in Russian, I think.
No, I bought one in Athens.
They're so cool.
Yeah, I have one. Yeah,
and then every little rung, which you shouldn't do, but mine broke on me. And so I unraveled it. And of course, the Jesus prayer is written on every little wrapped up rung. You looking that up, Josiah? Lestr. What's it called? Okay. Yeah. I would like to apologize to all the Russian speakers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I usually don't talk about this stuff because in some ways it's not the thing that interests me the most, and also because it's every group that exists has family squabbles in the details, and so it's true also in our families, and so sometimes it can be a little deceiving to just look at all those, and to like to like pick them out, I try to stay away from that. In reality, the truth is that I have a bishop. That's the reality. I have a bishop, and I consider him to be like my spiritual authority, and his priest is my spiritual authority, and that's really the way that I kind of deal with that stuff as much as possible.
Tell me the most awkward moment you've had with Jordan Peterson. It doesn't have to be with him specifically, but like maybe like you were with him and something happened, and you're like, "This is wild."
Okay, am I supposed to say this? No. Okay, so this is actually the funniest moment with Jordan Peterson. Jordan, if you ever watch this, I'm sorry, but it was really hilarious. We were in Florida and we were filming the Exodus seminar.
Yeah.
Right. And so we did the Exodus seminar, and then it's Saturday, and then it's going to be Sunday. So I said, come on. I said, Jordan, we looked at the Bible the whole week, so you have to come to church with me, And he's like, we'll see. I don't know. And so the next morning he texts me and he's like, you're such a bad influence. I'm coming, And so he comes to church with me. It's a cathedral in Florida, and it's a beautiful cathedral, all painted and everything. And so Jordan is just amazed. Like he's explaining the images to Tammy, and is just really kind of amazed by the beauty of it. And, and the liturgy starts. And then during the liturgy, Jordan keeps taking his phone out. And I'm like, what is he doing? And I'm standing right next to him, and he's typing on his phone. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm just trying to pay attention to liturgy. And he's typing on his phone, and I'm trying to pay attention. At some point, he's like, Jonathan, I want to show you something. This is during liturgy. And so he shows me his phone. And then I look on his phone, and he's writing a chapter for his book, the book that just came out now. Or I don't know if it's the one now or the next one. Anyways, he's writing a chapter in his book. And so I'm reading it, and he's like, and in the text that he's writing, he's talking about coming together and paying attention to the highest thing, to bind us to it and to come together. And I'm like, yeah. But then I'm thinking like, all right, Jordan, let's do it. Like we're here. Like let's do it now. So that was the funniest moment. One of the funniest moments that I've had with Jordan was like, he's so like, he's such a genius, and he's like, so he's in his mind is just going 100 miles an hour. And so it's like, can't stop, take his phone out, start writing the chapter for his book.
Yes. Yeah. God bless him. Yeah. When I had him on the show, I think there's a lot of Christians who are fed up with him, maybe for good reason, but I think a lot of the time due to impatience. We have a really short, what do you say? We give people a short leash when they show interest in converting and then don't.
Yeah.
It's like you've got 2 weeks, go. And if you haven't done it by then, you're somehow being deceptive, or you know the truth, but you're just refusing to accept it. And that is not at all the impression I got. I mean,
no.
Because I think the argument goes something like this. Well, he's not committing to Christianity. And we don't have to talk about Jordan Peterson. I'm sure you're not Jordan Peterson. You don't speak
No,
for him.
I'm not.
I'm sure of that.
But I think it's okay to speak to that. I think that, the thing about Jordan is that he's exactly what you see. Like the idea that he is planning or scheming or whatever, that's bullshit. Like he's just exactly what you see. And the struggles that you see him having and the discoveries that you see him having in terms of Christianity, all of those are real. And they're happening at the same time in his life. And so, I would tell people that are bothered with the fact that Jordan Peterson hasn't converted to Christianity to just mind your own business and work out your salvation. Like if you're annoyed with that, then don't watch his podcast and don't read his books. But, the truth is that Jordan Peterson has possibly been one of the biggest, how can I say this? One of the biggest draw into the church that has been in the last 10 years.
Like a gateway drug to Christianity. Exactly. For the new atheists, found a bridge, a lot of them.
And so, it's like, just thank God for that. And for the rest, it's, it's between him and God. In the end, it's like, you're not in charge of his soul, and just let him, and if and when he does become a Christian, for sure it's going to be 100% for real.
Yeah.
And, so, yeah.
Yeah, I often think that we want him like we want to make friends with the biggest kid in class. We want him on our side.
Yeah, exactly.
It can become more like that than a desire for his good. I'm sure it's both, but yeah. Did you come up with that design? I'm looking at your lapel.
Symbolic World Press. No, I didn't. So this is Heather Pollington. So, we're publishing these kids' books now. We're publishing fairy tales.
Yeah. I should have asked you to bring one.
Oh, yeah.
I love reading fairy tales to my kids. I'm in the Russian fairy tale. You should be proud of me right now.
I should have brought you a copy. So sorry. It's horrible. I definitely should have brought you a copy. Next time I'll bring you a copy. Yeah. So we're publishing these fairy tales. There are many reasons. One is that I love fairy tales. Second of all, I think fairy tales are second to the scripture, really, in terms of their capacity to kind of condense these very powerful truths. They're nowhere near the scripture, but let's say still, like they're scripture-like in the way that they tell stories. And also because the progressives have dropped the fairy tales now, right? Disney's dropped them. They don't want them anymore. They basically would like either them to be completely ideologically skewed, or they can't do it, right? They can't make Snow White now. Disney can't do it because they're so ideologically possessed that they can't do it. And so I just thought this is the right time to do it. And the thing is that, like, our enemies have known this for a very long time. Like, talk to the kids. Forget the parents. Talk to the kids. And if you can get the kids, we don't need, just let the parents be, and then we'll just, draw them up. And that's why so many are drawn to education, go into education and to get. So I thought, well, we need to now put beautiful things in the minds of the children. Like, let's do it. So instead of complaining about how woke nonsense is taking over our schools, let's give parents something beautiful and powerful to replace it. And so I started writing these new versions of the fairy tales, which are very celebratory, and very close to the original, but with some twist. And then Heather, she was a designer for like big franchises for Disney and Marvel and everything, and she also kind of liked what I was doing, and also loves fairy tales, and so now she works with us, and she's our kind of artistic director, and she's amazing. I mean, she's world class, and so she came up with this. We worked on this for months, like the logo for the press,
Yeah. If the one thing people can take away from this is to reignite their love for fairy tales and to read them to their children, I think this will be a podcast well worth it. My son every night, like, Dad, please, we'll pray the.
Are you reading the Russian fairy tales?
Yeah.
Like Slavic fairy tales are amazing. 'Cause
Yeah.
they have that. They're really complex compared.
Could
to
you please
a lot of-
tell me who this Baba Yaga Sheila is? Because I've got no idea
You
what's
don't know
going
who
on.
Baba Yaga is?
Well, I do because I read the fairy tales, but she makes no sense to me. So could you, first of all, just introduce her to people who have no idea what we're talking about, and then help me
Yeah, so
understand?
Baba Yaga is a crone, a witch or crone. She's actually ambiguous, and she lives in the forest. She usually flies in a pestle.
What's that?
No, not a pestle, a mortar.
What's that?
So a mortar, I forget which one is which.
That's all right.
Right. So the pestle and mortar, there's the
Of course.
Right. So there's
I know what you mean.
like
Yeah.
the bowl in which you crush something, and then there's the stick with which you crush it.
So what does she fly on?
She flies in the bowl with
Okay.
the stick. You know,
Okay.
it's pretty impressive. And she has a house that has chicken legs.
Yes.
You didn't know what that?
It kind of moves around.
Yeah, that moves around.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about fairy tales is that, and it's actually the thing about scripture too. A lot of people is that the stories are structural, and so some elements in the story can play negative or positive aspects depending on the context. And so they're actually just like a structure of a world. And so in the Slavic fairy tales, Baba Yaga will sometimes be an absolute threat, but then sometimes will actually be more like a crone figure that will help the female figure along her journey. And so that's what confuses people, is because they always think that, it's just the witch, but we have, it's like, what's the difference between the witch and the fairy godmother? These characters have very similar structures. It's just that one is kind of in the way to help you along, and the other is in the way to kind of to stop you. And so that's one of the ways to kind of understand these more complex fairy tales, because they use these figures as like they're place markers. Like, this is the place in the story where this character belongs. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Probably not. Like, a good example would be in the Bible. There are examples like this, actually, feminine examples in the Bible. So it's like, what's the difference between Rahab and Delilah? It's like both of them are traitors.
Yeah.
But one of is a traitor for the good, and one is a traitor. Or what's the difference between Delilah and Jael? Jael's even better. It's like Jael invites the man into her tent, calms him down, gives him milk, puts a blanket on him, and then drives a spike through his head. And then the other one does the same, cuts off Samson's hair, but she's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But they're the same figure, like in terms of what they're doing. So that's the way to understand is that
one is for good and one's for evil.
Exactly. So that's a good example of understanding how Baba Yaga could function in fairy tales.
And she functions as both, you're saying?
Yeah. So they use the same character to function in the two ways.
That's very fascinating. Yeah. So it's a confusing kind of figure.
It can be, yeah. But it's also because
But is that the point?
Especially because she's a forest figure, and the forest figures are always a little ambiguous,
Yeah.
And so
I'm thinking of what's his name from the Lord of the Rings? Tom Bombadil. He's a forest figure. He's very confusing.
Yeah, he's confusing. Yeah, he's more positive though. He's not as ambiguous, but you could imagine figures that are more that could go one way or the other, depending on the context, So you could think about it like actually Sphinx figure is a good example to understand. It's like, so the Sphinx poses a riddle.
Okay.
If you answer the riddle, you might get a boon, but if you don't, then it'll eat you. So is it a good figure? Is it a bad figure? It's like, that's the problem of the forest, or it's the problem of the ambiguous space, or the space of the challenge, or the space of the question, you could say, is that it is ambiguous in its nature, because it's a query, it's a question, it is ambiguity. It's a good way of understanding it. So, so the Sphinx is actually probably one of the best examples, like a guardian figure.
I want to give a shout out to Deacon Nicholas Kotar.
Yeah. Oh, you interviewed him.
Yeah, and he was kind enough to send me his collection of Russian fairy tales. So people go check him out if you're interested in picking up his books. You can find them on Amazon. I don't know where else he sells them, but Deacon Nicholas Kotar.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah. I've done quite a few projects with him.
Okay.
I like him a lot.
I mean, I love... there's a couple, what about the Grimms? Do you read Grimms?
Yeah.
Robber Bridegroom one?
No, that's
terrifying.
that one.
Absolutely terrifying. I was reading that to my kids one day.
Yeah, but the Grimm fairy tales are not all for kids. Really.
Well, I pressed on.
Yeah,
my wife's giving me one eye. Like,
so are Bible
sure
stories too. Some of them are not for kids.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, this one's horrible, but it's brilliant. I actually made it into my own horror story. I wrote it from a first-person perspective. But anyway, I also love, obviously, Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
Please teach me about Hansel and Gretel. That's my favorite. It's obviously one of the most memorable fairy tales.
Yeah. I mean, what is it that you're wondering about Hansel and Gretel? Like, is there something that you find ambiguous that you're not sure about?
Well, I just know that you've thought about this way longer than me and way deeper than me, and that you've probably got insights into this that are going to shatter my knucklehead skull. But I mean, what a wild story. First of all, what's interesting is like, I don't know, the thing I think is like, who's the witch here? Because you've got this stepmother who talks her idiot husband into starving their children to death because they don't have enough food for all of them. And he's like, all right.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So a good way to understand it is to understand the mother and the witch as either the same figure or as opposite figures. Right. And so you could say the stepmother in this case is the figure that wants to, let's say, reject or push away the children, in order to have her husband. So, or to have the man. It doesn't have to be her husband. So the witch in Snow White, that's what she does, right? She basically sees the children as a competition for what she wants. And so she wants to get rid of Snow White because she's a competition for her as the most beautiful in the world, and so she gets rid of her. And then you have the other version. You could say it's the witch in Rapunzel is a good example, where the witch in Rapunzel, she wants to like protect and like she's the devouring mother character, right? She wants to kind of keep the children and give her everything she wants as long as she doesn't leave, And so the in the story of Hansel and Gretel, those two figures play on each other. So you have the stepmother that wants the kids to basically die in the woods. That's the witch in Snow White, she sends them out into the woods to die. And then you have the Rapunzel witch, you could say the witch in the house, which has a candy house. And it's like, you can have all the candy you want. You can eat anything you want. You can have everything you want as long as you don't leave, as long as you stay with me and I keep you safe, And ultimately what she's doing is she's going to eat the children, right? That's the devouring mother. It's the most classic example of that character. But you can see how these tropes, they play out in different fairy tales in different ways. But in Hansel and Gretel, it's beautiful because you have both at the same time.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, was there a point to the husband freely giving up his children? Because obviously they come back to him and he embraces them.
That's
and they
a
live
weird part
happily
of the
ever
story.
after.
Yeah, that one's.
And so
rough.
I guess I'm wondering, like, did they not think it through when they put this together, or is there something there that I don't understand? It's probably that one.
No, I think that the way that it's presented in the story is that it's just presented that it's the woman who's an obstacle in the story, and so if the obstacle is removed, then there's a restoration to the father. But it obviously, in psychological terms, doesn't make much sense.
Okay.
You have to understand it on a
different level.
You have to understand it more on the level of that in this relationship, it's the mother that it's an obstacle for the children to have a proper relationship with the father. And once that goes away, then the children can have the proper relationship. But it's like you said, emotionally it doesn't make much sense. But it makes sense structurally. Like if you understand the story as a structure and you understand how those two aspects of the feminine are two excesses that can prevent a normal family from being together,
I know fairy tales are written by cultures, not just a fella sitting down and writing it. But I feel like today, if we tried to write something like fairy tales, it would be the bloke who'd be the threat. So,
but those exist in stories too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the robber's bridegroom, which I brought up earlier, the fiancé is this crazy murderer who eats women. But why I don't know. I think of them as classic fairy tales. You have a lot of mothers who are doing it, and I'm wondering.
No, but they're super balanced. The fairy tales will always you'll always be able to find a counterweight to one fairy tale in another, and you'll always be able to see the story of the ogre, for example, who keeps the woman, the ogre that keeps the woman in her house, and that you have to steal his heart. There are many versions of that, like the story of Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yeah.
Beauty and the Beast is a good example of a kind of tyrannical, where you actually see the weak man, right? But then the weak man cedes to a tyrannical man. So in the story of Hansel and Gretel, the weak man cedes to a tyrannical woman or to like a controlling woman. But you also have versions where a weak man will cede to a tyrannical man. So you can understand it like, you know, a girl that doesn't have a father will be attracted to like a really controlling man, something like that.
Yeah.
Could be.
What's your favorite of the Brothers Grimm's?
What's my favorite of the Brothers Grimm? I don't function that way. It's weird. I see fairy tales together. Like I see them as a symphony. And so I always like to see them in relationship to each other. So you saw what I'm doing. Like when I'm talking about Hansel and Gretel. Sorry, my cigar's going out.
Yeah. I think you want to light it while you're kind of puffing on it to get it fully lit. If I may give some cigar advice, but you got it.
So that's how I see them. It's the same with Bible stories. I see them as symphonic.
Okay.
And so it's like my mind is always looking for counterpoint. And so if I see a story with a character, I'm always looking for the counterpoint. What's the opposite, or what's an example of this, but in the other way, like I did with Jael and Rahab.
Yeah.
That's the way I think. And so I don't have like a favorite fairy tale. Although I love Jack and the Beanstalk. Like,
Tell me about that. Men, do you feel stuck in old idols or burdened by the pharaohs of our time? Do you know that you're capable of so much more than you're giving today? Exodus 90 is the #1 freedom app to help you become the man you were created to be. Exodus 90 is a powerful 90-day journey to freedom in Jesus Christ, and it starts on January 20th. I've met so many men from all around the world who have been blessed by Exodus 90. So download the Exodus 90 app today to join tens of thousands of men from all around the world for Exodus 90, starting January 20th, leading up to Easter Sunday. We all have pharaohs and idols in our lives, things that hold us back from being who we were created to be, things that keep us from love. It's time to leave our pharaohs and idols behind to journey to uncommon freedom in Jesus Christ. Join the men of Exodus 90 and Father Boniface Hicks, Benedictine monk and renowned spiritual director, who is the spiritual guide for Exodus 90 this year. We will establish daily habits of prayer, discipline, and brotherhood as we journey to greater freedom in Jesus Christ. So, go to exodus90.com/Matt to learn more about Exodus 90. That's exodus90.com/Matt to join tens of thousands of men from all around the world for Exodus 90, starting Monday, January 20th, and leading up to Easter Sunday.
I love Jack and the Beanstalk. Like,
Tell
just
me
because
about that. I remember, it's funny what impresses itself upon our imagination when we're children, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, as parents, we don't know the kind of impact it's having on children. I watched a little cartoon of Jack and the Beanstalk as a kid, and it frightens me.
Yeah.
I think back on it, and I remember being frightened. Yeah.
Well, that's the one we just published. It's called Jack and the Fallen Giants. Like, I'm going to plug my book, even though I don't have it. So it's called Jack and the Fallen Giants, and it really is my kind of desire to struggle with, or like, you know, wrestle with this story, because it's very powerful, but it's also very confusing, you know, because when you look at it at the outset, it's like, okay, so this boy, his mother is poor, and then she has a cow, but now he has to sell the cow, and he sells them for magic beans. And then he puts then, you know, her mother can't recognize the value of the magic beans, throws them out, beanstalk, climbs up the beanstalk and encounters the giant. And you think, what the hell? What is happening?
With a chicken laying golden eggs?
Yeah, so the first one usually he goes 3 times. So the first time usually it's a bag of gold.
Okay.
And then he comes down, gives the bag of gold to his mother, then goes back up, then finds the chicken that lays golden eggs, then brings that, and then goes back up, and then finds the golden harp, right, that sings on its own.
Okay.
You know. And so, yeah, when I was a kid, I loved that story, but I also struggle with it a lot because I wondered, Jack is a thief. He goes up there and steals things. Like, is he the good guy? Is he a bad guy? You know, what is happening in the story? And also, what's the relationship between the things that he steals, right? So he steals a bag of gold, then a chicken that lays golden eggs, and then he steals a harp. Like, is there some structure? It's like some relationship, or is it just random? And really, it's in meditating on that for years that I think I understood the story and was able to kind of open it up, I think, when I wrote it, to like open it up to help people see a little more what it means. Do you want me to tell you what it means?
Very much would like that.
All right, so I mean, what I think it means, you know, and you'll see when I tell you what it means, I'm never going to tell you what it means. Like, just like I did with Jael and Rahab, I don't tell people what things mean. I try to just show you the pattern, and hope you kind of see it yourself, because it doesn't actually mean something like, it doesn't mean like, oh, this means.
It's like the morals of Aesop's fables were inserted well after Aesop's fables were written, and maybe have.
They're not stories with morals, that's for sure. Fairy tales are really not stories with morals. Like, you can kind of try to make them that way, but they're more than that. Bible stories either.
Okay, fair enough. So you can try to make them like that. So my question to you is, are you afraid that you're trying to impose a structure that just isn't there on it?
Well,
when you find the relation between the bag of gold, etc.
Maybe. But then what I'm going to do is, hopefully, is that when I tell the story, I'm going to do it in the story. So if I do it in the story, then I'm not telling you like, this is what it means. I'm saying, hey, look at how I'm putting these things together, and notice how they shine a light on each other, you could say. And so I do think, though, that like most fairy tales with characters of that age, that are like 10, 11, 12, it's a coming of age story mostly, right? It does have to do with a transition in life. Most of the female fairy tales, they're not only about puberty, but they are about puberty to some extent. And they use puberty as a way of understanding transformation in general, or as a way of understanding how something becomes something else. And I think that that's what you see in the story of Jack. Right? So Jack doesn't have a father, he has a mother, and they're poor, And so the poverty of the family is akin to not having a father, because the father is the one who gives the identity, right? And the mother gives the body. That's the traditional understanding, And they also have a cow, which is kind of tongue in cheek, but that's what it is. So she has a cow that's running out of milk, and he has a mother that doesn't have a husband. It's like, right? Okay. Those two things are related to each other. And so but without a husband, she's running out of potential. It's a good way of thinking about it. It's like the widow in the story of Elijah,
I'm going to turn this heater up while you keep talking. How do I do this? Oh, here we go. See how useless I am? How do I turn on a heater? No, I got it. Okay.
So it's like the widow in the story of Elijah, where she's running out of food because she doesn't have a husband, but also because there's no rain from heaven. Those two things are related. She's not connected to heaven. She doesn't have a father, doesn't have a husband, and therefore she's running out of potential. She's running out of food. And that's what Jack's mother is the problem. And so Jack goes and brings the cow to town to sell it.
What was wrong with the cow?
It's running out of milk.
It's getting older. Is that the idea?
It's because a cow runs out of milk if it hasn't been inseminated. Yeah. And so it's...
okay.
Yeah, that's what... If it doesn't have a baby, it runs out of milk. It runs out of potential, right?
Oh, okay.
So those things are kind of connected.
Okay, thanks.
So it's also like a body, right? It's a cow. It's an animal. It's a body. And so she's like, well, this is not enough. We need to trade this for value. We need to trade it for money so that we can then buy food and we can live. And that's really what the story is about. But it's also about a boy becoming a man and learning what value is, understanding what patterns in the world yield value. And so he trades the cow. What does he trade it for? Do you remember what he trades them for?
Beans?
Yeah.
Bag of beans?
So why would he trade the cow for beans?
Well, isn't he told that they're magic beans?
Yeah.
Well, if he believed that they were magic beans, that seems like a good trade.
Yeah. So what's the difference? If you had to make the difference between a cow and beans, what would you say the difference is?
I mean, there are many differences, Jonathan. I'm not sure what you want from me.
Okay, so let me. I'll get. So
well, I mean, beans have potential. Right?
Yeah.
To become something else.
There you go.
Whereas you have a cow that has used up its potential.
Yeah. So the cow is running out of milk because it doesn't have seed.
Right.
And the seed doesn't have body. So they're related to each other. So it's like, this is seed. So he's 12 years old for all intents and purposes. And now he's discovering magic seed. He doesn't know what it's for. He has no idea what this magic seed is for. But the man says this is magic. But the thing is that beans are magic. Like seed is magic because it's a pattern. It has the whole pattern of the entire plant in it, but it has no body.
Wow.
Right. And so it is a coming of age story. There's a sexual element to it, but it's not just that. It's him discovering his own seed, you could say. But it's also the idea of like, he has to now understand what masculinity is. what is this? Like, what is a pattern without a body? And how does that become body? Like, how do you have a seed that has no body? And how does that become body? He brings the seed back to his mother. His mother doesn't recognize the value in it, partly because she doesn't have a husband, and also because she's living in the immediate, right? She's like, I need food now. And the seed are for the future. The seeds are something that can become something in the future, right? And so the beanstalk, so you throw the beans out, Jack goes to sleep, wakes up, there's the beanstalk, right? So the beanstalk.
Does the mother ever comment on the beanstalk?
No. Well, yeah, she doesn't want him to climb it, because the beanstalk is a lot of things, It's obviously, to some extent, waking up in the morning, when you're 12 years old. That is part of it. It's not the only thing. Like, I hate it because I don't want people to think that the story is about sex. It's not about sex. But there are sexual elements to it. Just like in the Bible, there are sexual elements in the Bible, but they're not about sex. They're using sex to help you understand something more powerful. So it is that, becoming a man, like entering into the world of masculinity, but it's a hierarchy, right? It's a hierarchy that goes up into heaven. So he has to climb the hierarchy and then deal with what he finds there. So he first of all, he encounters a giant. So every young man in the world has this experience. It's like you go into the world and you come into contact with older men that basically don't want to give you room in their world. They're happy for you to work for them, right? They'll just devour you. Like, they'll take your energy for their own purposes, but they don't want you to participate in the hierarchy. Everybody's had that experience. Yeah. You work for a boss, you work for someone who basically doesn't want to let you ascend properly. And so that's one of the aspects of what's happening there, right? It's like the giant who wants to eat the young man, and like I said, you could call it like the negative aspect of hierarchy. Right? So hierarchies aren't all positive. Some aspects are negative, and everybody has experienced that.
Yep.
So Jack, first of all, he steals a bag of gold, right? So he takes the bag of gold down, and it's like he's discovered something about the world, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. What's better than food? Well, it's better than food. Actually, secretly, it's the seed, because it's the future food, right? But now he's playing it out. He goes up into the world, finds money. Money's great because money can buy food. It's if you have money, then you can buy food. It's like a higher form of causality. It's like a vertical causality, right? But you bring the money, and then what happens? You run out of money. So what's better than money in terms of a pattern?
Well, something that keeps giving.
The thing that makes money, whatever that is, it doesn't matter. It's a chicken that lays golden eggs. But if you can discover what the thing is that makes money, that's much better. You've gotten a pattern that's much higher in the world.
It's the give a man a fish.
Exactly. Teach him how to fish. Exactly. So it's like that's higher up in the hierarchy of causality, right? It's like if I can get the thing that makes money, then I can have money, and then I can get food. Good stuff. And then you think that's where the story should end, right? Because now I've got wealth, I've got the money, I can generate wealth, and now I'm good. But he goes up a third time. That's the weirdest one. That's the one that took me a very long time to kind of understand.
Yeah, because the question is, well, what do you need now? Yeah. You have everything.
Mm-hmm. So he gets a harp. So what is he getting? It's like he's getting the pattern. He's getting the music of the spheres for all intents and purposes. He's getting the pattern that yields other patterns. He's actually, you could say in a Christian way, you'd say he's getting the logos. But that's not what it is. It's not a Christian story. But he's getting something that akin to the logos in the sense that it's the pattern that yields other patterns, that yields the way that you can have value in the world. And that's why that's the last thing that he gets. It's similar to the story of Jacob. Very similar.
I'm thinking of Jacob's ladder.
But also Jacob is similar to Jack because he tricks people to get the blessing. Yeah. It's very ambiguous in that sense. Like, is it good? Is what Jacob doing good? He tricks, fights with the angel. He fights he fights with his father. He tricks his father, tricks his brother in order to get to ascend the hierarchy. That's what he's doing, getting the blessings from heaven. And so you could say that what Jack gets is the blessing from heaven. That's what he gets, the last thing. It's like the music of the spheres. And so it's a really powerful story. Like it really does have a kind of, it's really cosmic in its implications,
So is it the harp, you talk about patterns, talk about meaning. Is this sort of like where we're meant to ascend in life? Like we're meant to go beyond the material?
I think so. So.
And you think of men that you've known who've stayed in one place or the other, right? So you've got some men who maybe are impulsive and want things to use them immediately. They don't look ahead. And then you perhaps have others, and maybe we find this within ourselves, who are greedy. Yeah. But then you meet like the gentle old man who neither of those things are as important to him as the greater meaning in life.
Yeah. You could see it like, the story of Jack and its hierarchy. You see it happen with people, even people who become very wealthy. You kind of see it. They make all the money, they do everything they wanted, and then at like 45 or 50, they're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And then they start giving their money away. They start getting involved in causes. They start, sometimes for good or ill. Sometimes,
or they blow everything up and go looking for the bag of gold again.
Yeah, exactly. Or you have that happen. Like some guys, when they turn 50 or whatever, like around
they go looking for magic beans again.
Then exactly.
Yeah.
Or they're looking
don't
for
work
a cow.
Anymore.
They just want the cow.
Oh, yeah.
They just want the cow. They lose their mind, and they get the young girlfriend and the sports car and all that stuff. But that's definitely the course that steers you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely the incapacity to see what true participation is, because when you reach that age, what you should become is like a mentor, right? You should be giving, but if you don't understand that, then you continue to take, and that doesn't
very
end
ugly.
well. Yeah, it doesn't end well. I mean, we see people that happen.
I always share this story, and I mean, no disrespect to this individual who's since passed away, but he lived in our town and he abandoned his family.
Yeah.
One of my best friends, he abandoned their family. I'm being very careful not to give anything away here, but went to a country near our country that's more like a party country.
Yeah.
Came back really fat, bleached blonde hair, bleached blonde hair, even though he was a darker skinned fella, and lived in governmental housing, had a shell necklace, was just so unattractive. And the reason I think about that is not to shame him, but to remind myself that I can also destroy everything and become that man, and I don't want to. Like,
but you can feel it. Everybody feels it.
Yeah.
Every man in the world
you get death in
has
your
a
nostrils.
moment when they're like, it's like I could just give in, like I could just give, because it's there, right?
Yes.
It's present, and you're right that these types of stories and the personal stories that we know of people who have gone that direction and have ended.
And I guess there's two sides of this. You tell me what you think, but like on one, you've got like the passionate man who like gives free rein to his passion and destroys everything around him in search for the beans.
Yeah.
But then maybe you also have the man who, out of dry obligation, kind of remains with everybody, but is very unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to be either of those men.
No, you don't. You don't want to be either of those. Like you have to continue to ascend in some ways, right? You have to continue to go up. Like if you just settle, then you're just going to dry up, like you said. Like neither of those is good. And like you said, you can immediately pull up examples of people who just completely settle and just become, just dry out. And then people who like lose their mind and then go wild. And I think that those are never the people you admire.
No. I don't admire those parts of myself.
Yeah.
And I know they're like hurting parts of myself. They're not like me, banging on all cylinders. It's the crippled part of me that's in need of a healer.
Yeah.
Or what we do is we kind of we tame, we find like little passions that don't destroy us, but they become idols nonetheless. Whether that be the father who's doing his crossword puzzles all day long, getting drunk, and abandoning his family in that way. Like he hasn't technically left, but he's checked out.
Right? For sure.
And that's like a way to kind of cope with the pain of existence and the pain of your own demise, which is on its way.
Yeah.
Golly. Right?
Yeah. And this is the thing. The thing too is like, this is difficult, but I think that there's actually like a limited amount of time that we have, or not a limited amount of time. It's like a clock winding down, because, as you reach a certain age, change becomes harder.
Yeah.
And so it's not that it's impossible. Like we know stories of people that have, radically changed, later in life. It's not impossible, but it becomes more difficult. If you're not careful and you let, either of those like take over your life when you're like in your late 20s and early 30s, I think that you can really be in trouble, because at some point it's just very difficult to change.
Well, there's that saying, set in your ways. It's like cement, and it's a lot harder to move.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think the answer is
a scripture verse.
Remembering God and attention, and, I think confession, like for me, confession.
Attention. Amen, brother.
Yeah.
It's about attention.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, the Hesychastic fathers, they say, remember God, remember your sins. That's, if you can do that, remember God and remember your sins, you'll probably be pretty good, because you know all the things that will lead you into chaos, and you also know what is driving you forward. Because if you just have one, or if you just have one, you're in danger. You need both. And like you said, to always know that part of you that could go wild or could lose it is always there. And if you're not careful, and you just kind of, you just skirt, you kind of flirt with it or skirt with it, like, the door can open,
So this is a verse that I just love. It's from Luke 21:34, and I'll explain why it blows me away, and I'd love your take on it, right? Our blessed Lord says, be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And I remember reading this, I'm like, wait, your hearts will grow drowsy because of these things? Like we all think that's the solution. Like I'm drowsy, therefore what I'm going to do is I'm going to like give myself over to sexual dissipation, become drunk, and then, I don't know, I'm reading a lot into this at this point, but the anxieties of life, I mean, like how many of us choose the anxieties of life by just continually refreshing our news feeds and getting angry. But it's interesting to me that Christ is saying like, no, these are the things that will make you drowsy.
Yeah.
But we think of them as the antidote to drowsiness.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. I need to just let loose a little.
Or I'm a really serious person. I'm really serious and I have to take care of all my responsibilities. I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of your responsibilities, but if that becomes the purpose of your life, it's like, that's not enough. There's no way you're going to dry up. And so being worried about, the money that's coming in, or being worried about your bills and being worried about these things, not that you should be responsible, you should be, but that's not a way to live, and also we can also set ourselves up in a way, I think, that can avoid that. It's like you can make decisions that will avoid that pressing down on you. Anyways, I think it also, it depends. I mean, it depends also on our lives. It depends on our circumstances. But, I've been very fortunate. Like, for example, like my wife, she likes being poor. That's been really a blessing to me, because it's like it's been a real blessing to me, because she's never pressed on me this need to be, to make sure that everything that we're generating all this revenue or whatever. Like she's fine with us being poor. She's also happy when we have money. Like she's not, but that's, to me, at least for me, that's been very helpful, So anyways.
Yeah. God bless her. And that helpful, you being an artist.
Yeah,
although
exactly.
You're a very talented artist.
Or else I wouldn't, there's no way I could have become an icon carver if I didn't have that possibility,
Did you ever flirt with atheism as a kid?
No, it's
never.
weird. No, it's like it's weird because I read a lot of postmodern authors when I was in college, but they never brought me to atheism. I was reading some pretty dark, some Émile Cioran, who's a French kind of mystic nihilist, who talked about nothingness in a kind of mystical way. And I would read him. There was something in it that was attractive to me. And then I discovered negative theology, and I was like, actually, no, this is what this is driving towards. This is actually the productive aspect of this, And actually, Jacques Derrida who's the famous French post-structuralist, like the father of postmodernism. He wrote a little book. He wrote a little book called Sauf le nom, Save the Name, right? which was like a postmodern introduction to negative theology. It was a 17th century text called the Cherubinic Wanderer. And I was blown away. And it actually led me deeper actually into my faith, strangely enough. Who would have thought? But it led me to kind of understand this more negative aspect of God, right? The idea that God is not a being, that God is not not some big whatever invisible being in the sky, that he's actually, the infinite source of being, and therefore is not a thing, not
within our categories.
Yeah, doesn't have a, and then there's the positive aspect of that as well. But like the negative aspect to me was helpful. And so it's weird. I never flirted with atheism.
I try, how you look back on your life.
Did you flirt with atheism?
Did I? That's what I was about to say. You look back on your teenage years and I'm trying to be really honest, because you can, over the years you tell your story to people and sometimes it might slip away from reality. So I'm trying to go, what was I? I think I didn't like going to church. It seemed more likely that God didn't exist and that this Jesus thing was a fairy tale that parents told their kids to behave. That was a simple narrative that I could adopt. And I don't know, I know that there are, I think, atheists of goodwill, right? Who, people will accuse them of not wanting there to be a God so they can live however they want to live. And I'm sure that's true, but I'm sure it's not true for certain people. And for me, I don't know. I think it probably was true. I was getting into all sorts of things, and I liked the idea of the mystery of life that didn't have any kind of demand on me, which I think is what maybe led me to look into kind of New Age spirituality, Buddhism, because that didn't tell me not to have sex with my girlfriend, not to look at porn, and not to steal. Maybe it did. I don't know. I wasn't listening that attentively.
Probably did. It was the California Buddhist side. That's what I call them. It's like these fake American Buddhists that want the Buddhism, but not the actual implications on their life. Like it's like I always say, you meet an actual real Buddhist, and that actual real Buddhist is closer to my Catholic grandmother than they are to like some California yoga Buddhist. It's like, because they just basically use it as an excuse.
But what do you think that is? Because what I wanted was the mystery and goodness that came with religion, but not the moral demands. I mean, it's not that. It's not that novel. I think we all get it.
Yeah, of course.
But it was this desire that there had to be more.
Yeah.
But I didn't want that more to tell me what to do. And I even remember like trying to practice meditation, and this was as the internet was coming in. It was very rudimentary websites. I would look up these little kind of New Age meditations. If it would use religious language like heaven, even if it wasn't referring to the Christian heaven, it would turn me off.
Oh, really?
I had nothing to do with that.
Interesting. Well, to me, the solution, to answer your question, I don't think I was an atheist because I'm not even sure what the word meant. And I didn't have any good arguments. Maybe I did have good evidence for God's existence, but I didn't have any good evidence for atheism. It also was kind of like, it was kind of cool to be an atheist. It was like this faux sophistication. It's so funny because I grew up in a very different, I don't know where in the context you grew up, but I grew up in a context where everybody around me was pretty much an atheist.
Did they, were they every philosophical atheists?
Yeah. Every teacher I had, like go to college, every teacher hates religion. And so I was like punk rock. I was a Christian. I felt like I actually funneled my rebellion into being a Christian all through my teenage years.
I think we're seeing that today.
Yeah, because I was like an exception, and I was happy to kind of flaunt that exception. Yeah. There was probably some pride in that, but I would say that it did save me from that kind of easy atheism, because I was like, no, I'm different from you. I'm not like you guys. And so I kind of remained a Christian my whole life. And then it feels like also my readings, let's say, grew up with me. And so when I would have been ready to kind of be annoyed with the moralistic aspect of Christianity, then I read certain Christian authors that presented the faith in these mystical terms that made the morality downstream from true being. And so if you read Boethius, I read Boethius in my
Journey of the Mind. Which one? The Constellation of Philosophy? Beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful because he really presents the consequences of evil as being, so it's not like this, it's not like someone wagging a finger at you. It's like, here is a way to become unhappy. Of being that if you don't live that way, you will be less. And it's a true thing. And I think that, and you see it in your own life, the moments when you kind of give up the moral life, then you actually become less.
Yes.
Right? And it's not about finger wagging. It really is about being more of a person. So to me, once I saw that, it was like, oh, it doesn't mean that I didn't sin. Obviously, I sin all the time. But it means that at least I didn't see like a justification for it. Like I never had this idea like, oh, this is fine. This is okay.
Which is why Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia is so important. What Thomas Aquinas means by happiness, for example, is not what modern people mean by happiness, this sort of emotional contentment.
Yeah.
If it were that, then yeah, sure, the drug addict in the orgy is happy. But no, according to Christianity, the Blessed Mother weeping at the foot of the cross is actually happier than the fella in the orgy.
And that's why Boethius really, I mean, for me, it was a strong argument. He basically says, all the other pleasures, they're all external to you, and if you take them away, then you're miserable. So what is that? Like, what is that if you depend on these external things, that if you take it away, then all of a sudden you feel like you're completely lost. So then that's not real. What is real is something that has to be within you, or else it's actually you're a slave to something, whatever it is. So as soon as I kind of understood that, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, this seems pretty, difficult to attack, let's say, as a vision.
Did you ever read Pascal?
Some, yeah. Young.
I'm not getting into his wager or anything, although I think it's excellent. But I think he has this wonderful line. He says something, I'm paraphrasing, but all of the ills of man or humanity can be traced back to the fact that a man does not know how to sit alone in a dark room silently. Something similar to that. When everything's taken away.
Yeah, when you stay alone with yourself.
Yeah,
exactly.
I asked, Peterson was sitting there and I asked him, I don't know if you saw this, what's the best argument for atheism?
I haven't seen the conversation, sadly.
And he said, there isn't one. It's an illegal chess move.
Yeah.
But when he said that, I thought, well, maybe you and I don't mean the same thing by God. And I don't know what he means by God. But if a man by God meant existence or something, as we commonly understand it, then to say what's the best argument against God is a stupid question, because you're asking what's the best argument against existence, and existence is apparent.
Yeah.
But what do you think the best argument for atheism is?
Well,
or do you not think like
that? I don't think that way, but I do think that the best argument for atheism is suffering. I don't think that's a surprise. I think
it might be the only one.
Yeah,
I don't think it works.
Yeah, I think that meaningless suffering is the best argument, but I also agree that I don't think it works. I think that actually Jordan Peterson has been able to really formulate it beautifully. Is that you actually have to in the world that we live in, you have to suffer for meaning all the time. You always have to suffer in order to attain something more. It's actually absolutely necessary. And so people who don't suffer enough will like go to the gym and like make themselves suffer in order to attain something more. It's like people join the army to suffer so that they can like turn that suffering towards meaning. And so, we actually, I think once we understand that in fact suffering is suffering and sacrifice, you could say, is necessary for all purposes that we have, then we realize that, in fact, that the only thing you can do when you suffer is to turn towards meaning. It's actually the only thing you can do, and then when you see the lives of the saints, and I think there are particularly stunning examples of that, for example, even in modern Catholic saints, which is that you see these characters that are completely crippled, like their body is just withering,
Francis.
Yeah, but then nonetheless, they are so full, and they wouldn't trade their spot with you at all. And so you think, how horrible, like why would God do that to someone, right? And then you're like, that person doesn't think that. That person actually is in their suffering because of their great suffering. That great suffering becomes a kind of portal towards more transcendent meaning. Now, I don't want to suffer. I hate saying that. Every time I say that, there's a shiver that goes down my spine. And I'm like, please, God, don't make me a martyr.
Don't give me what I just said was good.
Exactly. But I can see in the story, like I can see it, and I can see it at a little scale in my life. Like the things that I find valuable are the things that I suffered for. Right?
Yes.
Because if something just comes, like, it's like, or
it doesn't mean anything, does it?
No.
Like if a child just is given everything and given the inheritance and never has to work for anything.
And it doesn't mean that like It doesn't mean that we're masochists at all. Like, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that it means that suffering can become glory in the right context if it's aimed at something higher. And that's one of the greatest revelations I think that Christ brings to us. That Christ came and he did a few things that are interesting. On the one hand, he did relieve suffering, like he did. But then he ultimately pointed that and said there's actually a higher way, because if you really want to find the highest way, it's actually through suffering. It's like if you go through the suffering, that's why the martyrs are the highest saints, because their suffering has become glory.
That's interesting. So if the atheist says that suffering, is an argument against God's existence, and then you have Christ saying, unless you pick up your cross daily and follow me.
Yeah.
Like, unless you suffer.
Yeah, that's a rough one, because it's like the argument in the Brothers Karamazov, like of course the child that's being tortured, or all these things are difficult to ponder. Like, they're difficult, because we definitely have to not be naive about this, And then the only thing you can think is that, and I mean, atheists watching this will just hate what I'm going to say, but it's like, it's the trust that Christ is with the people suffering.
I want to tell you about Hallow, which is the #1 downloaded prayer app in the world. It's outstanding. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Sign up over there right now and you will get the first 3 months for free. That's like a lot of time. You can decide whether it's useful to you or not, whether it's helpful. If you don't like it, you can always quit. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. I use it. My family uses it. It's fantastic. There are over 10,000 audio guided prayers, meditations, and music, including my lo-fi. Hallow has been downloaded over 15 million times in 150 different countries. It helps you pray, helps you meditate, helps you sleep better. It helps you build a daily routine and a habit of prayer. There's honestly so much excellent stuff on this app that it's difficult to get through it all. Just go check it out. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. The link is in the description below. It even has an entire section for kids. So if you're a parent, you could play little Bible stories to them at night. It'll help them pray. Fantastic. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. That's interesting. So if the atheist says that suffering, is an argument against God's existence, and then you have Christ saying, unless you pick up your cross daily and follow me.
Yeah.
Like, unless you suffer.
Yeah, that's a rough one, because it's like the argument in the Brothers Karamazov, like of course the child that's being tortured, or all these things are difficult to ponder. Like, they're difficult, because we definitely have to not be naive about this, And then the only thing you can think is that, and I mean, atheists watching this will just hate what I'm going to say, but it's like, it's the trust that Christ is with the people suffering.
Right, and I'm with you. And I think you have to distinguish too between, what would make you an atheist and what should make you an atheist. Because there are times that I think about the suffering in the world, stories I've heard about what has happened to different people, and I hear those stories and it doesn't feel like God exists. I feel like God might not exist. Yeah. But then I think about it and I can't make the argument run.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with the atheist.
It's also like
maybe he experiences meaning and feels like there could be this great plan to the universe. All right, fair enough. Like there's feelings and then there's arguments, and we shouldn't be.
But then there's a harder question, and I think this is also one of the things that Jordan Peterson has brought out very clearly is, you know what? You are going to suffer. And so you can argue against reality, right? And so this is something that I hear sometimes with some of the celebrity atheists, is that sometimes they're arguing against reality. It's like suffering shouldn't exist. Well, it's like, well, suffering does exist. Now what?
Yeah, you haven't made it better.
Like
by getting rid of God, what are you left with
exactly. Now you're just left with suffering.
Yeah.
And so the idea that the only thing we can do with suffering in our lives is to turn it towards purpose. That's actually the only thing we can do. And so it's like, so if that's not, so that seems to show something about reality, about how reality functions, which is that if you turn suffering towards purpose, it transforms suffering into something else.
And it makes you a more full, beautiful human being that everybody recognizes as such.
Yeah, that's right. And that's weird too, because the people that we admire often are people that have suffered greatly, because they've been able to not become bitter, not become, not turn that suffering against others, right? Not use that as an excuse to do evil, but have transformed it into some jewel that they hold, and it's beautiful,
What do you say when people come up to you and they say, I'm an atheist and I'd love to believe in God? I presume you're not the kind of fellow who lays out a syllogism for them, but maybe you are. I don't know.
I don't. I mean, I just think that people who say that they're just lying. They're just like, I'd like to believe in God. You hear people say that like, oh, I'm an atheist, but I really admire people who believe, but I can't believe. And it's like, whatever. It's like, you believe in smaller gods. You definitely have to. There's no way around it. You have little gods that you follow. You have little gods that provide you the meaning every single day in order to be able to finish your day and to not kill yourself. Like you need to have those little glimmers of something that bring you into the next step. It's like, ride those, right? Like see if you ride those and you see how they're embedded in higher goods and just kind of move in that direction. And then it'll just happen on its own. Like, so I don't have, I mean, whatever. I'm not going to argue with someone who says that to me, but I usually don't find it very convincing, Yeah.
When people, I was in Ireland recently and a fella stopped me on the street because he'd started watching Pints with Aquinas and he was an atheist, and it was a beautiful encounter. He said, I want to believe in God, but I don't see any reason. I'm like, all right, well, just believe in him. Just choose to. It's like, well, that would be hypocritical. I'm like, who cares? Just be a hypocrite. What's the problem with being a hypocrite? Just give up. Just do it. Yeah. And it's like unless you've got good reasons to think that what Christians mean by God isn't real and you want to believe in him, just go ahead.
Well, one of the things you can do, I think, if you don't believe in God, is to pray. Yeah. I know that sounds weird, but it's like...
Pascal said that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, after his wager, he's like, well, what if I can't believe? He's like, do what Christians do. Like, take holy water. Like, go to mass. Pray. Say your prayers. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because it's not something that happens just in your mind, too. It's not something that you're like, I'm just going to wait until, like, all of a sudden I believe in God.
Keep God up on the chalkboard until... Yeah. That's the other thing that's bizarre. I mean, like when you and I were kids, I mean, you lived in a bigger city than I did. I lived in a small country town, but what a simple life it was to grow up in a small country town. And unless you were reading books by the great atheists and Christians, you're just encountering like the Baptist pastor, the Catholic priest, the town atheist. And like, that's who you're deciding, between. But now there's always someone who could argue you under the table.
Yeah,
like unless you are one of these really brilliant folks. I mean, there's always someone out there who could destroy you. Or if not destroy you, at least appear that they do, or get you to a point where you don't know what to say anymore.
Yeah.
So you can't wait until you can respond to all objections before you believe something, because then you'd never believe something.
Yeah.
You'd never give your life over to something.
But this is the way, like, this is actually how I see faith. I see faith as the assurance of the things invisible, and you can understand it in terms of God, but you could also understand it in terms of every purpose that you have in life is invisible. Like every purpose that you have cannot be defended from the phenomena. It's like, and that invisible.
What does that mean? Defended from the phenomena. So here's a purpose. I love my wife and I want to love her radically until she dies or until I do. There's a purpose.
Yeah.
I can't find that anywhere.
No, it's not. How can I say this? Like, you can never have enough proof of that love, or the love that person has for you, or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's not there. It's because you have to kind of trust in the purpose and move the world towards the purpose. Because especially like the idea that you say, I want to love my wife as much as possible until the day that I die. And I would ask you, like, do you love your wife enough now? You would say, no.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, so you see something that is beyond what is now.
I see a deficiency.
And you want to move into that. Yes. And so it's not there.
It's not there.
Right. But that's true of every purpose. Yeah. Every single purpose you have. When you start moving towards it, it's not there. Because that's why it's a purpose. Because you have to change the world into that purpose. And so everything you do is based on faith in that sense, because there's an invisible thing drawing your action towards it. And you don't have it. Even if it's like, I want to make $1 million. Well, you don't have $1 million, right? And therefore, it's through faith that you're going to move towards that because you don't have it. And so you have to organize the world in faith towards that purpose so that you reach an invisible goal, a goal invisible in the sense of something that is not part of your world right now.
Not yet
right?
actualized.
It's not actualized. There you go. And so I think that once people can maybe understand that, it's like actually faith is part of your life all the time. Every time you have a purpose, you are moving in faith towards that purpose. And so, the idea that those scale, you could think about it that way. It's like, you ask someone, it's like, I want to finish college. Like I want to finish college. So like, why do you want to finish college? What is that going to give you? Yeah. And it's like, well, because I want a career. Like, why do you want a career? Well, maybe because I want to have money, or maybe because I want to be respected by people, or whatever. And so it's like, if you start to scale those goods into each other, you'll notice that they keep going up. If you ride that at some point.
This is the Nicomachean ethics, right? This is what he starts the argument with. Eventually you get to something where you say, I want to be happy, right? And no one's ever said, why do you want to be happy? Yeah. Like at that point, you've hit what's the line? You've hit bedrock, metaphysical bedrock with a shovel of a stupid question, to quote Sam Harris in a different context. Because people say, I want to be rich so I can be happy, but no one has ever said, I want to be happy so I can be rich.
Yeah. And also because most people, once they are rich, they realize that they ain't going to do it.
Yeah, and then rich, what does rich mean, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's something that also continues to. It's definitely not the right God to follow because it doesn't satisfy.
Yeah. Hey, have you read much of Descartes? And are you into this stuff? All right. No. Well, I won't worry about it.
I was able to. Well, I did read Descartes. I read Descartes when I was when I was 18, 19. That was a long time ago for me. Now.
I love Descartes. I think there's a solid argument that he wasn't a sort of epistemological skeptic as people portray him, but that he was using it as a methodological way of arriving at the truth. Mm-hmm. He's living in a turbulent time in Europe, Protestant Reformation, Galileo. People are, what can we trust? And so he's like, well, I'm going to turn inward and find what I can trust and build from there. And I like to think of it as a sort of ladder that he's trying to escape Plato's cave, but the whole edifice collapses. You've got Hume not long after him saying, well, the cogito, like I think, therefore I am, is like, what do you mean by I? Like, I don't think I exist. I don't think the self exists. Yeah. So now you've just got this like epistemology as a train wreck because we're trying to build it on these indubitable, incorrigible beliefs that we never have about anything ever. And why think we should? Yeah. So there's this other idea of phenomenal conservatism. Mm-hmm. So instead of sort of Cartesian epistemology that would say, I'm not going to believe something until it's absolutely true. Phenomenal conservatism would say, I'm going to believe what seems to be the case to me until I've got good reason to doubt it. In taking that approach,
because you do that all the time.
That's how we live.
That's how you walk on the road.
But I think that
you don't ask yourself like, is this road going to crumble?
Yeah.
If I walk on it,
all of our beliefs.
Yeah. Everything about you. Every time you move, everything.
Like
you do.
is my, like if you pressed me on how I know my wife's not a Russian spy, eventually, like very quickly, I wouldn't have much to say. If you pressed me on how I know Australia is an island, I've got like 3 arguments and I don't even know how to defend them.
Yeah.
My fear is that this sort of Cartesian epistemology has seeped into modern culture such that Christians are of the opinion that they ought to have a sort of incorrigible, indubitable belief. And if they don't, it's not worthy of the name. But it's just so inhuman and unnecessary. Like, how do I know you're who you say you are? I trust. And if I don't trust, I'm in a much worse state.
Yeah, but it's also like this is the thing. I see it as a kind of fractal participation. So, you trust a little and then you move a little and then you see the result. It's not just like this blind idiocy. It's like I pray, then I see the changes in my life, and then and then I pray and I see the changes. It's like, if I align myself this way,
yes,
it actually yields.
It's like a man in a dark room. If I walk this way, I can make progress. Sin is you turn this way and you walk into a wall. All right, stop that. That's not working for you. You're going to need to turn somewhere differently and aim yourself. That might not be a good analogy. But sin feels like that, doesn't it? It's like, it's the opposite. It's like nature, God will forgive you, but nature won't. If you make really bad decisions.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. Like the descriptions about sin in Scripture, they're not, like, again, they're just not moral finger wagging. They are descriptions of reality. Like, if you lie, you will go to hell, and your life will become hell if you lie, because you know it, because the time that you have lied and then hold on to that lie, and then you have to start justifying it, you have to start skirting around it, and you have to start making up other lies in order to hold up that one lie. It's like, that leads you into absolute chaos. So, and that's true about everything. Like every commandment in Scripture is not it's actually not morality in the way that modern people understand it. It's like, if you live this way, you will live. If you don't, you will die, and the world will collapse around you. You will be an agent of putrefaction for your family, for people around you. You'll bring everything down, including yourself. You already can enter into like the portico of hell right now. Like, you don't have to wait until you die. You can see it happen in your own life. So, these are not, like I said, they're not ethics, like not in the way that modern people understand ethics.
That's right.
Yeah, they're like, there's a path that you walk and you live that way.
What is your understanding of hell?
What is my understanding of
hell? Do you believe in hell?
Well, yeah,
Who
of course.
goes to hell?
Oh.
What do Christians, in your opinion, misunderstand about hell?
I mean, I think that I think that hell is a true, ontological state, and it is the state of obsession and sin that takes over your life, and that in some ways captures you, right, until you can't escape. I think that that's what hell is. And so that's the way that I understand it, and I think that the image that we have of the Gehenna, this image that can become permanent, that you can in sin become completely captured in a manner that, it almost devours you completely. Like, there's not much left of you except that. I think that that's what hell is. And so, I think the idea that this reveals itself at the end, is not a stupid idea. Like the idea that, when you reach the end of something, how can I say this? It's like, you've played out, right? So if you've played out your life and you've played it out in a way that has made you live in hell, then you're in hell.
I forget which saint it was. Maybe it wasn't a saint at all, but I think someone said, no one will be surprised.
Yeah.
It's hell all the way to hell, heaven all the way to heaven. That might not,
Well, I mean, in Dante, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's kind of horrific. But in Dante, you see that the people in hell want to be in hell.
Yeah.
Because they know, like because they're captured, and it's like, and that the moments that you've been taken up by sin and you hold on to that sin, you can feel it already. It's like, why am I holding on to this? I know it's destroying me.
Yeah.
I know that it's destroying me. Why am I holding on to it? Why do I keep circling in this
Why do I feel
thing?
like I can't let it go?
Yeah. And that's what I think hell is. I think, I love C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. I think it's one of the most powerful ways for modern people to understand hell. He describes it very, very beautifully. So that's what I think,
Yeah.
Cool. What do you think about hell?
Well, it's like Lewis said, if there was one Christian doctrine I could get rid of, it would be that.
Yeah.
And yet, it has the full weight of scripture and the tradition. The wise man proportions his belief to the strength of the evidence, and therefore I have to accept it, as a reality. I don't know what it means. It scares me. I'm scared about it. I'm scared about it because there's a lot of accusations today about people, especially in the political world, about like they're lying.
Yeah.
And you hear this a lot on YouTube, that people attack each other like he's a liar.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I often wonder how I know I'm not a liar.
Mm-hmm.
because I have to think that some of these people who believe these horrible things, let's say about big topics of the day, like child mutilation, abortion, all these horrific things, like I actually think they believe that they're good.
Yeah.
And they believe that they're right.
Yeah.
And I know that they're wrong, but I'm like, okay, but that just makes me nervous. I'm like, what is it that I believe that I'm wrong about, and how would I ever know that?
Oh.
Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner.
Well, I mean, I think that's the way to do it, you know.
I hope these people are self-reflective in that way.
I
hope I am. I was telling you earlier, St. Ephrem the Syrian, that beautiful prayer, you know, if I've made fun of my brother's sin when my own faults are countless, oof, just crushes me every time. Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, I think the best...
How do you know you're not lying? Like, do you ever struggle with
lying
that?
Sometimes, you know.
I mean, I guess if by lying we mean believing or telling an intentional falsehood, all right, fair enough. I think that's pretty easy for me to gauge, I think. But the human heart is a wicked thing, and I know there are times that I try to appear humble because I'm arrogant. I know I even said that to appear humble.
I think we often lie. I mean, I lie in the personal stuff, like I convince myself. It's like I convince myself that I'm right, you know, to be angry with my wife, you know, for several days. And I think like I'm totally right. You know, I am completely in the right here. And, you know, and it's like, that's definitely a lie. It's a lie. And it's a lie that destroys me, and it will destroy me, it'll destroy my relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in that sense, we lie to ourselves all the time.
Isn't that weird? Hey, like I've had that experience as well, where I'm just so pissed with my wife, and, it's like this desire to be sad, this desire almost. And I think that might be what hell's like, or it's like, I will not be made well. Piss off. Yeah,
I want
to be
suffer.
upset.
Like, I want to suffer.
But not for any good meaning.
No.
I want to lick my wounds.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky's good about this.
I want to feel sorry for myself.
Yeah.
I want to do all that.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, it's like, that is definitely a little glimpse of hell.
I'm so glad I'm married. You know, like we were saying earlier about like reality, like doesn't forgive. I think it's really lovely to be in a relationship with somebody where you can see how your sin manifests itself and does damage. You get like an immediate, what's the word? Like feedback, right, immediate feedback.
Yeah, kids will do that too. It's like, man, when you become kind of selfish and self-absorbed and you have kids, man, it appears pretty fast.
So you were a solid Christian when you had kids.
Yeah.
What is something you learned along the way of parenting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think you see your selfishness, you know, you just see it, because sometimes it's like, you know, you just want your own space. You just would like to be able to do whatever you want, and you can't, you know, and the kids, obviously they take up all that space, you know, and it's something that I learned. And I think one of the things that I learned, now my kids are older and they're teenagers, and they're, you know, I've learned that every moment that I was able to go beyond that, you know, and basically just be there, you know, it's yielded 1,000-fold. Like, it's yielded amazingly. And
it's a death to self. Yeah. It's the end of the night when you're exhausted and you just want some time alone with your wife or a book. Yeah. But you can't because they're there. Yeah. And then you've got two choices. You know, do I get angry and kind of bark, or do I just give in to it? Which not to be dramatic, but can feel like a death, because it's a death to my preference. Yeah. And it's always the beautiful thing. I know it's the beautiful thing. Why don't I do it? I'm an idiot. Yeah. And I think so. Like, I can see, you know, in my children that the moment that I've spent where I've been completely there and generous have yielded fruit, you know, and every obstacle, let's say, to my relationship with my older kids is my fault. That's the way I see it. Like, it's, you know, it's something that I mean, I hate to say that, because I don't want to, like, you know, I'm not saying that sometimes there are all kinds of external factors that can bring about difficulties, but I think that at least in my case, that's been healthy to notice that, you know. And then try to readjust yourself all the time and say, okay, like, it's not too late. I can still
can still be that father, you know. But I would say being a father is the greatest thing in terms of my spiritual development. Like it's one of the greatest things that has happened to me, you know. Being a husband too. Don't tell my wife though.
No, I will never say that.
She won't watch this.
Yeah,
because they you know, it's funny because it's like in some ways we don't have it enough inside us. Like I'm not a monk. We don't have it inside us to be able to get through our own passions, you could say. But it's sometimes these people that are there surrounding you, they're like mirrors, and you can see yourself in them, and you can see your sins, and you can see, it's like, it can be very sobering, but it could also be a great
And the temptation is to blame them for reflecting your sin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's true of whether you're a parent or not, right?
Yeah.
To blame everything and everybody and every circumstance around you.
Yeah. And it's also one of the things that I think that for sure being a father has done for me is it also made me appreciate my own parents.
Yeah.
Greatly.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, just all the sacrifices they've made and realizing that, you know, things that I thought were just obvious and that, you know, they owed this to me. It's like, oh no, wait a minute. No, they could have chosen at any time to check out or to, you know, and it's like, no, they stayed and they remain involved. And it's like, it's made me definitely appreciate my parents way more. Definitely.
Someone once said to me, and this broke my heart, he's like, there'll be a last time that your children ask something as they're growing up, and you won't know when that is.
Yeah.
So there'll be a last time when your son's like, Dad, can you lay in bed with me? There'll be a last time. He's like, can you read me a story?
Yeah.
Can you watch me ride my bike? There'll be a last time, and you will not know when that last time is. That makes you want to cry. Yeah. But I've shared this a bunch of times on my show, so people will forgive me if they've heard me say this, but I think it's worth saying again. Sometimes I'll do this thought experiment.
Yeah. Where
I'll think, imagine if in the future we find a way to build a time machine. And you can go back in time to whenever you want. There's only one catch. When you're back in time, you won't know that you went back in time. It'll seem to you like you're doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
And so I'll be, you know, my beautiful son, Peter, he's such a good boy. He'll have me lay in bed with him. And I'm done. I'm tired. I'm tapped out. And I'll think, what if this is, you know, I'm aware that this is a thought experiment, but like, what if this is the time that I took a time machine back, which is just a very complicated sci-fi way of saying, what is the good in this moment that I should be seeing that I'm not seeing? Like, these are the good old days right now. So how do I live in them and love my children?
Yeah, that's right.
I have beautiful children. Oh, they're so good and funny and good looking. And yeah, that's not true. Some people have ugly kids, but I've got really beautiful kids, man. They're so good. Do you find, I don't know if are your kids way better than you were when you were a kid? You sound like you were pretty good, but.
Yeah, I would say in some respects for sure. I think that's been beautiful to me. Like one of the great things has been like my son, for example, like he's very different from me and he's developed all these other skills and other interests and stuff. And you know, it's been exciting for me. Actually, I really enjoyed watching him kind of become something different and something else, you know, sometimes a bit of a sadness that I can't guide him in the things that he wants, you know, like some things he's like, oh, Dad, I really like to do that. I'm like,
if he wanted to be an icon carver, you could crush that.
I'd be fine. But it's like, if he wants to like, you know, become more like kind of engineer, like it's like, but it's been really, I really enjoyed watching that happen. You know, I found it very beautiful. And so, you know, and then at some points you really realize that your kids are just different people. Like they're part of you, but they're not. Like they're
not an appendage.
They're just basically, you know, and yeah, it's scary. Yeah, but it's also.
I think that one of the hardest lessons I learned at the time was to, as your children get older, to give them more leash, as it were. You know, you have to let them make bad decisions and trust them. That was really hard for me.
Yeah, I
think parents. Many of us kind of become parents, and we say to ourselves, "I'm not going to do what my parents did." Right. But we have a litmus test, like here's what it means to be a good dad, you know, and I love my dad. I think for him, it was like, I need my son, me, to have good grades and get a good job. That was his kind of thing. I think. Whereas for me, because I was so wrecked by pornography, like my litmus test was my kids will not be like damaged by pornography. And it's almost like I forget all the other things that I should be doing, like the tenderness, the kindness, the guidance. It's just this one, like, you become kind of myopic in your,
Interesting. It's been fascinating to see. My kids my oldest is 19 and 17 and 14. So it's like right in that.
Are your eldest boys?
Yeah, boy and 2 girls.
How do they feel about the work that you do? Do they watch your interviews? Do they know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah. They don't watch I don't think they watch my content, which would be really weird if they did, probably. But, it's been wonderful in some ways to be able to like take them along. I think it's been very fruitful. Like I took them to Europe to do some things, and sometimes I'll take them to conferences and stuff. And, it's been great to watch them kind of discover a bigger world. And I really enjoyed that and very grateful for that opportunity, So it's been great. I've enjoyed it.
What do you do for fun that's not impressive?
What do I do for fun?
Like if you could take a day off right now, like next week, the day's completely yours. You can do whatever you want, be wherever you want. What would you do?
Well, this is the thing, is that I would just do the things that I do. I love what I do so much. I wish I had more time. Like sometimes I wish I had more hours in the day, because like I'm not doing a lot of icon carving now. And so I kind of wish I had time to do that, but it's okay. It's not painful. It's just like, oh man, I wish I could do more of that. And, but usually like if I have a day off, I usually pretty much just sit on a chair and like stare out. Like I actually don't do much.
I'm like that. I think I wish I was,
just because it's like there aren't that many of those days. There are very few, and so when they come, recently what's been fun is my 2 older kids are gone. They left the house. They're studying, and I just this with my youngest daughter, 14, and I realized that because she's the youngest one, in some ways I had less time with her than I did with 2 older ones. Just naturally, because obviously my firstborn, like, it was just all him, and then the second one and the third one. Then by the time you're the third one, you have to spread your attention on the 3. Yeah. And so I kind of realized that I had less time and stuff. And now with my 2 older children leaving, all of a sudden I have this amazing opportunity with my daughter to just spend time. And so yesterday, my wife was out of the house for the weekend. And we just spent all day like making like Christmas ornaments, and we just put up the tree and like did all this stuff, and it was great. So it's like I thought it was difficult for my children to leave. It's painful, but then also there's this interesting possibility, which is, oh wow, I guess that's what happens when the youngest kids, sometimes they get it a little rough because and so I really enjoy that. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I love doing this. That's why I feel like people are like, what are you into? I'm like, I just like talking about it. I like smoking cigars and having good conversations. Yeah, that's what I love. Yeah. I love to read books. I love to sit in my chair and just read a book. That's what I want to do.
Reading, since for sure, I'm doing a lot less reading. And so if I ever sit down and read, it's very enjoyable.
Yeah.
But I don't have not a lot of that going on. Yeah, for sure.
I got some questions.
Questions from the internet, right? The interwebs.
The interwebs from our local supporters. There's going to be 8 billion here, so I'm going to do. Haven't seen these obviously, but what is the symbolism of Neuralink?
What's the symbolism of Neuralink?
Asks Matt.
Yeah. Well,
what does that even? I don't even know what the question means.
Well, I think they're trying to understand what what it means that we're merging with computers.
How do you feel about that?
Well,
I mean, we're already doing it.
Yeah, we're already doing it.
This is part of my arm.
I think that it's it's definitely, like you said, it's a process that's been happening for a while, like the technification of the human. It's in some ways, the way that I understand it is that it's this idea of the garments of skin in Scripture, right? The idea that we add things to ourselves in order to make us more powerful and also to protect us, against the world outside. Mm-hmm. It's a tricky process, but for sure, this has definitely been out of control. Like it's definitely out of control. And so I think the idea of Neuralink is mistaking power for wisdom, just like most technology, actually. It's the idea that if I could have a processor in my mind, then I would all of a sudden be this greater person, and that's just not the case, because that's actually has nothing to do with being human, or like what it is that you find valuable in being human. And Neuralink's not going to make you a better person or a better father or a better husband or just a better human being. It's just going to make you more powerful. So I think that in Neuralink, we see the extreme version of what technology always does, which is it just makes us more powerful. And if we don't have the wisdom to implement it, then it's actually quite dangerous. And so
I was showing my wife the other day ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And they have this new feature now where you can like talk.
You can talk to it. Yeah.
And that's wild. And like you can interrupt it and it'll stop and talk back to you. And I'm like, how long until we're embedding this in dolls in our house that we talk to, and then robots that walk around that we chat with?
Yeah.
Have you thought a lot about how, in 50 years from now, what do you think we're going to be seeing?
No, I don't think it's sustainable. I think that it will get out of control, but I don't think that this is human.
What does that mean, out of control?
Well, what I think is that, so think about it like how the boomers' desire for, freedom and everything, and their desire to experience all the pleasures has led now many of the youngest generation to kind of turn away from that and move towards more meaning, yeah, exactly. So I think that the technification of the human will also create a backlash, which might be quite powerful, because one of the things that technology can do, actually not just technology, but one of the things that the fall can do, and technology is in some ways part of the fall. I know that sounds weird for people to understand, but in some ways, the garments of skin are a reaction to the fall, right? So Adam and Eve fall, and then God covers them in order to protect them from the outside world, which is now hostile to them, and then that becomes a city. Cain builds a city, and then that becomes technology and becomes civilization. And so in some ways, how can I say this? Like, because of this increase in power and this increase in facility, one of the things it does is it can make us act more deliberately than our ancestors. That it's possible. So it's simple. Like in a village in an ancient world, there was just a limit of what was possible. So because of that, the church was the highest building, and just naturally you would have to interact with others, and they would create a kind of harmony around you with people, because it just was necessary. If you wanted to survive, you had to do it. And so you kind of embody these principles almost naturally.
Yeah.
What technology does is it makes it possible not to embody those things.
Yeah.
So you can end up alone in your house, order from Amazon every day, not talk to anyone for years if you want to. You could just live there and be completely isolated from everyone. And so what it does is it forces people to be more deliberate. We have to now be more deliberate about community. We have to be more deliberate about our relationships. And so I think that can become a good thing. It won't necessarily become a good thing, but for some it will. For some it'll be a kind of, it'll turn the fall into a kind of self-awareness that is positive, but a lot of people will get lost in the process. That's for sure. Yeah, but we see it. Like, it's funny because my kids, right? We didn't want them to have phones until they were quite old. And it's complicated. Our life was complicated. We had a big crisis in our life that forced us to put them in school. And then in school, they had to have a phone. Like even the teachers wanted them to have a phone, But now my own kids, they realize. And so they are the ones managing their own screen time. They're like, every day they're watching their screen time, and they're like, I need to take 15 minutes off, half an hour off. Like they're just like trying to reduce their own screen time because they, in some ways how can I say this? It's like they have to be deliberate about things. Like now they have to, before when I was a kid, I would just go outside and there'd be kids there.
Yeah.
And then I would just play with them.
Yeah.
And it was just normal. But now there's no one outside. And so my kids, they have to be deliberate about their friendships. They have to be deliberate about their relationships. And so I think that it can be an opportunity for great growth, but
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you think of like men's groups.
Exactly.
Bible studies, like these things. I don't know. Did my dad have men's groups? No, he probably just had men that he had to interact with because that's the way life was.
And so there's something about it that it's funny because in some ways it shows that we're weakened. And the fact that we need men's groups means that we're weakened, but it also means that there's an opportunity, like I said, to become more, to be more deliberate about our relationships. So, trying to turn this Neuralink thing into positive.
Right, it's helpful. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah,
but I'm not getting the Neuralink, folks. It's not happening. It's not.
I wonder too if I've said this before. Like things have to maybe burn through culture before we learn our lesson. I often say, like, I've been speaking about the negative effects of porn for a while, and I think I can do it pretty convincingly, but I don't think anything I said back in the 70s, if I lived then, no matter how big my microphone was, would have helped.
No, exactly.
But now it's like people are like, porn is like disgusting. It's stupid. Why would you masturbate to people pretending to like you? This doesn't seem like a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we know why you would do it, of course.
Yeah.
But like, why wouldn't you want to be better than that?
Yeah.
But it almost we had to become so pornified for a kind of negative reaction to it. And I think something similar is happening now where you see these teenagers who are like, I'm not getting a smartphone.
Yeah.
But we never would have thought that when it first came out. It was magic.
Yeah. In some ways, it's like this is the secret of the fall. In some ways, a secret. I mean, it's like, okay, so you didn't want God. Well, you're still gonna get there. It's just gonna be very painful. Like it's just gonna be painful. You're gonna have to suffer to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the case with this. If you had listened to a Catholic priest in Quebec, in the early 19th century, if you read what he would said, he would have been like, actually, you know what? He was absolutely right about everything. And so we went completely the other way. And at the time, you wouldn't have known because the secular world hadn't materialized itself. But now we have it. Now everything that the Enlightenment promised us, we have, and we see what it does. And we've seen, how it destroys community, how it destroys family, how it just ravages. And so at least now, like you said, it's become, at least for some people, it becomes patently obvious that no, this can't work.
Peter Hitchens he was in an interview recently just saying, basically my whole life has been a waste. Like all the things that I wrote, all the things that I said, no one listened to. I should have just went and sat on a beach. He's a pretty pessimistic fella. I like him a lot. He's fun to listen to, but like his brother. All right. Let's keep going. Romanus says, when starting an icon, what are some of your first considerations for the composition?
Well, it depends. There obviously the tradition. When you're making icons, you want to be the idea is you want to make something that will be recognized by the community. That's one aspect, right? And so it's not that there's no room for innovation, but the idea is you want it to be received, and therefore you want to follow the tradition sufficiently for it to be received by the community as something that they recognize, and that's something, and it's, people will sometimes formulate it in theological terms, like you follow the tradition, like these has all the symbolism and all the theology. And I think that's right. But there's also a more practical element, which is, you're actually there to serve the church. That's why you're making the icon. You're not there to just express your whims or express your thing. You're there to serve the people that you're making the icon for, and to serve, to serve Christ, obviously, and then obviously to serve the church. And so that's the first thing you want to consider is you want to, if you're going to make an icon, you want to see what the tradition has about that particular icon. So if it's a saint, how has the saint been represented? If it's a feast, how has the feast been represented? And if you don't understand it, like just copy, seriously, like just copy. And then you also want to adapt it to the needs of the person commissioning it, because most of the time you don't make icons just because you're hanging out and you just want to make an icon. You actually make an icon for someone. And so, what is their need? Is it for an object? Is it for personal devotion? Is it for a church? All of these things will make the composition and will help you kind of decide what it is that you put or don't put in the icon. How small it is, how big it is. Yeah. These are all really kind of boring because maybe you expect me to have some like big theological thing, but the tradition has it all. And so, then it's just adapting it to the particular case, the particular situation.
This is some of these questions are too long. Let's see. Father Bolts says, Jonathan, can you ask Matt why he hasn't given Meme Monday responsibilities to Josiah yet? Okay.
What? I don't even know what that means.
So I have a locals account where we have a community, and every Monday we have Meme Monday, where I post a funny meme and everyone tries to come up with the funniest meme. And I think sometimes I forget. So that's the answer, Father.
There you go.
DJ Krug says, no question, just thanks for your recent work with Dr. Martin Shaw on Christian Wonder Tales, and also really enjoyed your appearance on Foundations of the West. Thank you, Matt, for such an amazing guest, he says.
Yeah, Dr. Martin Shaw, if you don't know him, he's an astounding voice right now. You know, he's a mythographer, he's a storyteller. He's one of the greatest storytellers alive. He's really, he can tell the Iliad in 20 minutes and he can tell it in 9 days. And he does it. Like, he does these insane bard-like events where he just tells these stories for days on end. And he recently, like about 3 years ago, had a conversion to Christianity. Oh. And now he is bringing all of his skill into the... And so we had this course called Christian Wonder Tales, where he explores all these weird Christian stories in Irish folklore that have been kind of pushed to the side because they're too strange. And so he kind of goes in there. It's really amazing.
Wow. Caleb Cunningham says, if you could only read 3 books or authors for the rest of your life, what would they be? And I'm going to add, you can't say the Bible.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't say the Bible. I'm so boring. Everybody who's listened to me I always say the same. It's like, I think St. Gregory of Nyss's Life of Moses is astounding. And St. Ephraim the Syrian, the Hymns on Paradise. These 2 books have been really, crucial to me. And then St. Maximus, the Confessor. These 3 saints, they've really kind of given me the
beautiful.
course.
That's a much holier answer than I would have given. I would have said, I don't know, Tolkien, Dostoevsky.
What would you say? You've said Dostoevsky? Yeah, I get it. But if you're saying if you only had
you're right. No, that's a good answer.
So I want to tell you about a course that I have created for men to overcome pornography. It is called strive21.com/Matt. You go there right now, or if you text STRIVE to 66866, we'll send you the link. It's 100% free. And it's a course I've created to help men, to give them the tools to overcome pornography. Usually men know that porn is wrong. They don't need me or you to convince them that it's wrong. What they need is a battle plan to get out. And so I've distilled all that I've learned over the last 15 or so years as I've been talking and writing on this topic into this one course. Think of it as if you and I could have a coffee over the next 21 days and I would kind of guide you along this journey. That's basically what this is. It's incredibly well produced. We had a whole camera crew come and film this. And I think it'll be a real help to you. And it's also not an isolated course that you go through on your own, because literally tens of thousands of men have now gone through this course. And as you go through the different videos, there's comments from men all around the world encouraging each other, offering to be each other's accountability partners and things like that. Strive21, that's strive21.com/Matt, or as I say, text STRIVE to 66866 to get started today. You won't regret it.
I got a question for you, and I don't know if I'm going to understand your answer, and I wish I could. When you read like the stories of the Desert Fathers, and there are, the Flowers of St. Francis, I think is what it's called, like little stories of him, or St. Louis de Montfort talking about experiences people have had with the rosary. I'm just going to say it really offensively. Like, sometimes I'm like, this just seems like bullshit. Like, these stories just seem like bullshit. Okay. Now, I'm so afraid that you're going to tell me, but they weren't. Yeah. They were exactly true. But I'm like, no, but I don't think they were, though. I think some of them didn't happen. And so, but I don't know, like sometimes I listen to you and it feels like the literal and the metaphorical are the same thing.
No, so it's not that...
I'm open to miracles taking place. Yeah. I believe in the splitting of the Red Sea, so I'm not saying that these things can't happen.
Yeah.
They're an obstacle to me. I want to learn from these people, but I start listening or reading their books. I'm like, I just can't get past some of these fantastical
tales. Well,
what's wrong with me?
Yeah, well,
there's a lot.
Yeah, in that regard. I know. So one of the issues is, people are going to find this is weird, but like when you watch a movie, when you start to watch a movie, you suspend disbelief. That's what you do. That's how you can watch a movie, or else it would just be unbearable to watch a movie. You actually have to suspend disbelief and enter into the story, and then let the story do what the story does. And so what I would suggest is that for those types of stories, that's the first thing you need to do, is to basically just take the story for what it is.
Okay.
Literal in that sense, because literal means what's in the text. That's what literal means. Literal means it's literary, right? Literal and literary are the same root. So you look at the story and you take the story for what's there, and then you just take it seriously, right? Now, the difficulty is when you try to elucidate the mechanical causes of some of these stories. Now, there's a reason why the mechanical causes aren't described, is because they don't matter to the story. They're not important to the story. Like how it is that this is possible is not important to the story. And so that's the way that I approach it. I read the story for what it is. And, I trust, especially if it's from a saint, I trust the story and I just read the story. Now, the truth is that the way that events are described by the ancients are just not the same way that we describe them in journalistic, kind of police, form ideas. Like they're just not the same. And so we just have to accept that. It's like the text describes something that happened this is the way that I say it. It's like the text describes something that happened with the best words possible to describe what it is that happened. And that's all you need to know. You don't have to understand all the mechanical causes. Doesn't, that's the way that I approach. That's the way I approach scripture. Like I think everything in scripture happened. Like, did it happen? Because one of the problems, like this is actually one of the problems. Like the text says this happened, and then the secular kind of materialist asks, well, what really happened? And you're like, what do you mean? The text says, and it's like, yeah, but what happened? Like, how did the Red Sea split? Like, was it, what did it look like? What were the material causes, or what is it? And you're like, well, that story doesn't say that. The story doesn't describe that. It's like the reason why you remember the story is because what it means. That's why you remember. That's why you care about it. You don't care about it because you can describe the material causes. You don't care about anything because you can describe the material causes. You care about what it means. That's why you remember a story in the first place. And that's what you need to just kind of hold on to, at least in my case. And then one of the things you discover, I think, as you move forward is that you find that the world is far more enchanted than you think. And as you kind of notice that, just ask yourself, it's like, how far does this go? Right? How much does the world of meaning and the world of factuality interpenetrate? And if I see glimmers of that in my own little sinful, boring life, what happens to people whose lives are completely dedicated, to a life in God? Is it possible that their world is more full of that kind of stuff? Like all the little miracle coincidences that happen in my life that show me something about my sinful aspect or kind of reveal something about the world to me. Like everybody's had those experiences where all of a sudden it's like, oh man, this is pointing me to something. Well, how far does that go? You don't know because you live a wretched life. And so it's like, because I live a wretched life, I don't see the limit of that, but I know people and I've seen enough miracles in my life to know that definitely miracles happen.
Because I think it is a reasonable question. I mean, Alex O'Connor pressed Jordan Peterson on this, right? Because you do have these heretics, even some prominent Catholic priests back in the day, who would say, well, Christ rose spiritually, and it was written down as if he had risen physically. When someone says that, well, now there's a distinction that has to be made here. So I think it's a reasonable question to say, no, I'm actually asking, did he walk out of his tomb or not? That makes a difference.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I would have to say, I'm going to be very literal with you. Like the text doesn't say that he walked out of the tomb, right? The text says something. Read the text. The text both talks about the resurrections and befuddles you in every way, because the text doesn't say that Jesus stood up and walked out of his tomb. What the text says is that the disciples arrived, the tomb was empty. What the text says is that Mary Magdalene saw someone in the garden, didn't recognize him, and then suddenly saw that it was him. What the text says is that the disciples saw them and didn't recognize him. And then all of a sudden they revealed that it was him. You know, that's what the text says. The text doesn't say that
Sure.
Jesus. So I'm just saying to be careful
going to be
because
literal,
you
yeah.
want to. I would say be very literal, like in the sense that stay close to the story. I think that's why we say in the creed, you know, we say he resurrected according to the scriptures. It's like, don't try to add anything. Don't try to make it some phenomena that you can grasp or that you can put your hands around. You know, I do believe Jesus Christ resurrected bodily.
Okay.
But the idea that I know what that is like, I don't know what that is. How can I know what that is? It's like, it's the craziest thing ever. And the text describes it in a way that makes you understand that you cannot completely master this. Like, if the disciples themselves didn't recognize him after the resurrection, it's like, don't think that you can totally.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
I do.
Yeah.
What do you say to the person who says he rose spiritually from the dead?
oh, that's
and-
bullshit. That's just not what the text says. And also, like, what the hell is that anyways? Like, what Christianity is that? Christianity is about the body. It's like Christianity is about the heavenly Jerusalem, which will be the entirety of creation coming together and, you know, becoming the body for the risen Christ. And so it's like the idea that he not risen bodily, like the entire story of the Bible is about that. And it's about it more than you think, in the sense that it's about his body resurrecting and then becoming the seed for everything else joining into that body. And so I'm also I'm not giving you a materialist description. I'm saying this is what the scripture says. When the scripture says that we are the body of Christ, we are the body of Christ. We are the body of the resurrected Christ. It doesn't mean that, oh, no, now you found a good way of saying it. Now it's like, oh, he resurrected. I remember hearing someone say that. He resurrected as a community. And I'm like, no, that's not what the text says. The text says he rose bodily and we are joining in that body. And we are going to become a cosmic version of his resurrection, you know? And so it's like, that's what the text talks about. So I don't know how to say this. Like, it's like, I'm sorry if you can't see, like, I'm sorry for the people that would like to know what happened. The Bible actually doesn't describe the resurrection.
Right.
It's not in the story.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. It's like, leave a little mystery, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It definitely did. The tomb was empty, and yeah.
But
it
he
says,
starts showing up asking
what
for
it
fish.
says, and it's like, and it's very, very mysterious, and I think it's mysterious on purpose because it's not as simple as what we would like to make it. You know?
Okay. Awesome. Tim Pool, not the actual,
not the actual Tim Pool.
Well, maybe this is the actual Tim Pool.
It's
We'll
like
see.
Sneaking in your chat there, Matt.
He says, how does music factor into the symbolic world, into your symbolic world?
Yeah.
Do you love music? Do you listen
I
to
do.
music? What do you listen to?
I feel like I don't understand music well enough, you know, but I do understand it in the way that I talked about the harp in the story of Jack, you know, that music is a version of patterns that is one of the purest versions of patterns. You know, it's actually it's quite disembodied in the sense that it makes us want to move, you know, but it itself is just a relationship of proportions that we hear. Mm-hmm. And then it makes us want to move. It's a pretty astounding thing. It is in some ways the image. That's why I like the idea that C.S. Lewis says that, you know, Aslan sung the world into existence. You know, there are traditions that say that Adam and Eve in the garden spoke in verse, for example, like that they were in some ways maybe singing when they were speaking because they were closer to the pattern, right?
Do you like Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I do.
Gosh. Have you read the Silmarillion? I mean,
No.
this idea of singing the world into existence was exactly how Tolkien...
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. But I know I have my... how can I say? I like Tolkien, but there's a limit to how much I like Tolkien.
And is there a limit? Is that your fault or is that his fault?
It's possibly my fault.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that this is a weird thing to say, but I think that in some ways what Tolkien did and what C.S. Lewis did with Narnia and what Tolkien did, in some ways they created something that opened up a possibility of types of storytelling. And I think that it's funny because in some ways you can ask yourself, like, why is it that Tolkien didn't write it in the Christian world? You know, and why is it that C.S. Lewis also didn't write it in the Christian world? I don't totally have an answer for that, but I think that now is possibly a time where we can do that, where we can actually tell stories like that within the Christian mythos, you could say. Not mythos in a bad sense, but mythos in the sense of like a world structure, and that we can tell stories in it. So one of the things that I'm doing, wrote a graphic novel with my brother called God's Dog. Okay. And it's basically trying to do that. So we're trying to tell a kind of epic story, but that the characters, so like the main character, St. Christopher, who's a dog-headed man, who's like this kind of monster. And St. George is in the story. And we put in all of these kind of cosmic elements of Christianity, like the Leviathan, and there are angels and demons, and like trying to tell a kind of Tolkien-esque epic story, but not in an imaginary world, but actually in the Christian mythology, you know, kind of like, I mean, in some ways what Dante did or what Milton did, but you know, with a contemporary medium.
Where do people get these books?
Oh,
what's your website?
Yeah, so symbolicworld.com. People go to symbolicworld.com, and then we have a store there. For now, we're just selling them on our own Shopify store, and we will move at some point towards kind of bigger distribution, but
did you find a publisher, or you?
No, we were doing it ourselves.
Who are you getting to do the printing and the binding? Or?
Yeah, just find printers. So we have some printers in Europe and some printers depending on what we're doing, printers in China, obviously. Trying to...
This is another example, right, of things that have to burn through culture until we get sick of them. You know, like, no offense, I know Amazon does not a terrible job, I guess, at mass producing books, but I mean, you get an Amazon book, you know it's an Amazon book. Yeah, and if you want your book to be beautiful.
Yeah, in some ways we're kind of aiming in the other direction, I think. So for our fairy tale books, for example, the fairy tale books are really heirloom objects. You know, they're cloth bound with like foiling and debossing and full color printing.
Oh, because I'm going to get all these books.
Yeah, we in some ways we want the parent to like sit there with their child and like read the story of Snow White. And like, you know, I remember when I was a kid, there were these books in the bookcase that were like the beautiful, precious books.
There's some of these up here,
exactly.
Like the Summa, yeah.
And so kids' books now, they become throwaway because people just leave them and the kids just, you know, throw them around and stuff. Like, I want a book that the parents actually, you know what, I'm going to put this up in the library, and if you want us to read it, I'll take it out and we'll read it together because I want you to give this to your children, kind of thing.
When you travel with Jordan, do you bring some of these books to sell?
No, I mean...
It's too difficult, isn't it?
It's very difficult in my context to do that. Yeah. I think there will be a point where we're going to do that, but we're kind of scaling the production, obviously. We've had some publishers approach us to publish the books, but...
People are willing to pay a lot of money for something beautiful because we're so sick of things that are cheap and throw away.
Yeah, so that's what we basically said, look, we want to do this to the max. Like, we want to make these absolutely wonderful and beautiful. And in some ways, we felt like a publisher would be in the way of that. And so for now, this is how we're doing it.
Symbolicworld.com?
Yeah, symbolicworld.com.
Yeah. Well, to that point, Silas says, for his current fairy tale series... I've got Snow White and have ordered Jack and the Fallen Giants. Why did he choose the stories he has for the series, and what are the threads that connect the stories?
Haha. Yeah, so this is something we didn't mention. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to integrate some aspect of postmodern storytelling into the stories. Sounds weird, but...
Well, what does that mean? What does that mean, aspect of postmodern?
So one of the aspects of postmodern storytelling is collage. Right. So one of the things people do is you see it, like Shrek is a good example, where basically you take all the fairy tales, you mash them together. Yeah. You saw that there was Into the Woods did that. And there was a series called Once Upon a Time that Disney did for adults. So what they do is they take all the fairy tales, they mash them together, and they try to do that in a way that is mature, right? In the sense that they tried to be, how can I say this? They tried to be adult about it, but usually what they mean by adult is just become really cynical and kind of dirty jokes and exposing power dynamics and, you know, this really postmodern trope. That's what you see in Into the Woods, for example. It's like this dark version of story tales of them all crashing together. It's all about, you know, adultery and cheating on each other, and it's all this kind of... And Shrek is full of like humor. kind of dirty humor, like even sex jokes like that are kind of on top of the potty humor. And so what we thought is, like, couldn't we create a fairy tale mashup where we have all the characters kind of symphonically interact with each other, but instead of doing it to create just dirty, whatever cynical take, we could actually help the adult reading it get insight about what these stories are about. And so the stories will bleed into each other as we move forward. And so we started with Snow White, then we have Jack and the Beanstalk. We're going to have Rapunzel, and then the Valiant Little Tailor. So we have two threads. One is like a girl thread and a boy thread.
Okay.
And then the characters will cross over. So a simple example is that, the witch in Snow White becomes the queen in Snow White becomes the witch in Rapunzel. And so trying to show how they're the two opposites that I said. So like the witch throws the queen throws the girl out, and then she kind of falls, and then now she wants to protect her and like completely control her. And so then these characters will have arcs as it moves through. And so the stories were chosen in a way that they were the most memorable fairy tales, the ones that most people know about. And then ultimately for me to be able to string them together so that by the time you get at the end, all the characters will kind of come together and there'll be like this like symphonic ending. The last book is Cinderella. So.
Have you wanted to do this for a long time?
Oh yeah. This is something, I mean, I've loved fairy tales for a very long time.
How come it's happening now?
Well, it's happening now because I'd written this version of Snow White for my kids, when we were homeschooling. And I'd written it as a play because I wanted my kids to put it together. And they didn't want to do it because they were too young and they're kind of shy because my son was gonna like wake up Snow White and kiss her, and they were like, yeah, we can't do it. It's like thought it was they were too young. Like for them, it was cringe. Like it was too icky and whatever. And so like, okay, whatever. We won't have to. But I had the play, and then when Disney, I found out at around 2020, I think, or maybe before, that Disney was going to put out a version of Snow White for their centennial. And I knew they couldn't. Like I was like, they can't make this story. There's no way. They can't have the prince kiss Snow White, wake her up. They can't have the dwarves. There's all these things about the story that they cannot do because they're so ideologically possessed and they don't understand the stories anymore. So I thought, what an opportunity to do it now, because basically the guardians of these fairy tales have decided that they don't want them anymore. So it's like, you know what? Yeah, we'll take them. And then we'll make them into something powerful and beautiful. And so that was the impetus in some ways, was to kind of, to in this moment when the big players are dropping these stories, like to say that we're going to pick up the pearls and we're going to make a beautiful necklace out of it. So
beautiful. What's the latest with the Disney Snow White?
They're going to put it out, but I mean, it's going to crash. I don't see how it's going to be successful.
Isn't that interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Because I wonder, do they think it's going to work?
I don't think they
like
think
Amazon thought with
no.
Lord
I don't
of
think.
the Rings,
I think at this
Rings of
point.
Power?
I think at this point they just have to.
Remember what Kyle called it?
Who?
You remember what Kyle called it?
What? Oh yeah. What did he call it?
I know. Do you want me to say it? Well, we're not live. I'll cut it. Sam Brown and the 7 diversity hires.
Yeah, there you go.
No, don't cut that. Yeah, that's Sam Brown and the 7 diversity.
In some
hires.
ways, I think they're going to put it out, but I think they already know that it's going to fail. They spent so much money on this. I think it's going to be one of the most expensive movies ever made, but it's going to be ridiculous.
Do they even care that it fails, or does that just reinforce their?
I don't know. I think at this point they're basically Disney is just in survival mode. They're just trying to survive.
And have they realized? Will they realize?
I think they have.
Yeah, their shareholder meetings are public, and it's bad.
I think they have, because they're losing money like crazy.
Isn't that lovely? Isn't that great?
Well, this is what I'm talking about when I say that the fairy tales and the gospel stories, they're actually representations of reality. They actually represent the real world, even though it sounds weird because it's dwarves and princesses, but in terms of the structure, they represent a structure of reality. And so the idea that you could just fiddle with that in any way you want and that you'll still have people's attention, it's like, no, actually, no. Those stories have been refined over millennia through attention and remembering. It's like a story is remembered for a reason. Even if you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. You remember a story for a reason, and then you tell it for a reason. And maybe when you tell it, you change it a little and you see what happens. Those that change it a little and it's remembered more, then it's remembered. And those that change it a little and it's not remembered, it's just forgotten. So it's almost like a Darwinian process. Like you can imagine that these stories get refined and refined and refined just by memory and transmission. So the idea that you can take a story like that is maybe thousands of years old, we don't even know how old these stories are, and that you could just make it into your ideological tool, well, that's going to run out because people remember them for a reason.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so in some ways we have the world on our side. Like, these stories, the gospel stories, the fairy tales, just making them shine again, people will be attracted to them because they're real.
Yeah. You said earlier when I said about the robber's bridegroom that some of these aren't meant for children, but children love them. They love when things get killed and all the horrible details. Did you censor some of these things as you read
when
to
I was
your
a
kids?
kid?
To your kids,
a little bit.
When I
read to my kids, I made the mistake. Don't make the mistake, folks. You know, I made the mistakes. I was like, I want my kids to know the Bible stories. So I'm like, started Genesis, go through the Bible stories.
It's wild.
That was a bad idea.
Yeah?
My kids were not ready for it. And so
Okay.
I had them crying and like, and I wasn't playing it up or anything. I was
Yeah.
just like, here's the story. And it's like, how is this possible? And so I'm like, yeah, actually, I think there's a,
Different kids are different too.
yeah, and there's also like levels of maturation.
Yeah.
I do think that fairy tales, they are meant. I think they are meant to traumatize a little, you know. But it also, I think it depends on the children's capacity to handle trauma. I think that fairy tales are in some ways, you could say something like trauma managing tools, because what they do is they present children with a traumatic experience in a way that's contained in a story that is it has elements that are fantastical. And so it's not as painful, right, as a real trauma, but it also contains the structure of the trauma. And so it's like, you know, every child has imagined that their parents don't love them. And every child has feared that. And so that has to be in stories. It has to be in stories. Every child, and, you know, and then all the elements of, especially sexual development, you can understand like an 11-year-old girl or 12-year-old boy, like they don't know what they're going into. Like they have no idea. And one of the things these fairy tales do is that they offer a kind of tuning fork, like a little structure to help the child have images in their mind. You know, and it won't be conscious, it's unconscious, but it will give them tools, you could say, to get through the chaos. You know, and so some people say, oh, the story of the prince, you know, that saves the princess, you know, it's what a stupid, ridiculous patriarchal story. But it's like, you know what? You know, a young girl reaches puberty, starts menstruating. It's like, what the hell is that about? It's like, I'm bleeding. It's painful. Like all of these changes, all of a sudden, I get all this attention that I don't understand what it's for, what it's about. Why are people looking at me? Where are these boys? Like, what's happening? And so it's like the idea that should lead towards a marriage and towards children, and that you should find the right person in order for that whole chaos to make sense. Like the idea that that's a stupid patriarchal story, it's like, no, that's actually what it should be. It's actually how, you know, you can get, especially like the young girls, you know, they hit puberty earlier than the boys. And so all of a sudden they're literally surrounded by dwarves, like literally surrounded by all these little boys that are definitely not the guys that I want to be with, but they're there and they're pestering me and they're around me and I don't know what to do. I don't know what this means. I don't know like what's happening. And so I think that these stories, like both for the boys and for the girls, like one of the things they do, it's not the only thing they do, but one of the things they do is they do kind of give a track to help people understand what these transformations are for, like what they're leading to. You know, like the same with the Jack story. It's like you go through these transformations, you have this energy, you've got this erotic energy, but also this kind of aggressive energy. What do you do with it? Where does it go? How do you aim it? Like, you know, and so it's like these stories are there to help you understand. It's like, no, climb the ladder, right? Climb the ladder, you know, enter into the world, you know, be careful. The guys up there are there to eat you. They will try that, but it doesn't mean you can't make it. Doesn't mean you can't find your way. It's like, these are crucially important stories.
Wow. Well, I want everyone to go get your book, but give us one insight into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs then. You did a beautiful job with Jack and the Beanstalk. I don't expect you to do the whole thing, but I mean, just what you've said about the bleeding and the dwarves makes me think.
Yeah, you can realize what it's about. So you can understand that you can understand that Snow White, one of the aspects of Snow White is in some ways a young girl discovering all the negative aspects of femininity and then trying to figure out what the purpose of this is. And then also, what is beauty for? Like, that's what the whole story is about, you know? Because on the one hand, she becomes the most beautiful. And then because of that, she's basically thrown out. And so you can imagine a girl, she kind of reaches puberty, she becomes attractive and beautiful and desirable. And therefore, she goes through this chaos. She's all these boys, or even like the negative aspects of masculinity. That's what the dwarves can represent. Like, itchy and whatever, sneezy and dark and stupid and all of these like negative, all these like kind of these inappropriate men that
grumpy,
are like
dopey.
little like sections of what masculinity is. That is not what she needs to. That can be her mate. That can be like her prince, the one that will make sense of all of these things that she's going through, right? And so that's one of the aspects. And then the queen comes and she tries to trick her into using beauty for power, right? Because
how does she do that?
well, it's difficult because people don't know. Like in the Grimm version, the queen comes 3 times.
Yeah,
right.
I
So
know
she comes and she brings a corset.
Right, that's right.
And,
and then a comb, and then an
so
apple.
ask yourself that question: who's the most beautiful in the world? Snow White.
Okay.
So why is the queen bringing her supplements to her beauty?
Yeah.
Why is she saying, put on this beautiful corset, have this beautiful comb? What the hell's going on? What's happening? Think of your 12-year-old daughter that all of a sudden wants to put makeup on.
Yeah.
And she's like, how do I deal with this problem of beauty? And how do I deal with supplement to beauty? Like, how much do I put my beauty in a way that will attract others, and how much do I keep it? All of these questions are very difficult, right, to go through. And so that's what Snow White is dealing with, and then ultimately,
interesting.
This is my take on Snow White. People might disagree, but I always wondered, again, just like in Jack goes from a bag of gold to a chicken that lays golden eggs to a harp.
Yeah.
Right. Snow White goes.
The apple seems out of
there you
left
go.
field.
What's the apple?
I don't know.
So this is my take. People disagree with me if you want, right? I think it's related directly to Adam and Eve. I think the story is direct because she eats the apple and she dies. And I think that it has to do with knowledge of beauty.
I never made that obvious connection.
Yeah, it has to do with knowledge of beauty. She's offering her something like knowledge of beauty. She's saying, it's like Snow White is beautiful because she doesn't know that she's beautiful. And the queen is trying to make her know that she's beautiful, but in like a twisted way. She's like, put on this beautiful comb, put this beautiful makeup on. It'll make you beautiful. Like you'll know that you're beautiful. You'll see yourself in the mirror, right? Just like the queen. And the mirror will tell you that you're the most beautiful. And I think that that's what the story is about. So it's like knowledge of beauty leads to her death, and then ultimately that is and then the prince coming is this final restoration where she discovers what beauty is about. Like she discovers what beauty is for and what all of this transformation is for, which is to be united with the prince.
He also kisses a dead woman.
Well, that's the thing, is that this is harder. And I did change it a little bit in the story to help people understand what it's about, just to help, because it's already about that in the story. So in my version, what I've done is I have the prince see her at the outset. He comes and visits her in the castle, and then he's enamored with her. And then he's like, come away with me. Like, I'll take you, come with me,
Yeah.
And then he tries to kiss her. And then she resists and she says, don't awaken love until it's time.
Beautiful.
Right. Which comes from the Song of Songs. And then when the prince comes to the end, he remembers what she said, which is don't awaken love until it's time. So this is what it's about. In some ways, it's about a lot of things. It's about the idea of coming into a relationship when you're ready to awake, not before. Like, be very careful about, let's say, giving yourself before you're ready, before it's the time. And then at the same time, it's also, there's a more specific aspect, which the whole thing, like, sorry, folks, I'm on Pints with Aquinas. We can talk about this stuff.
Sure.
It's the whole thing is also about menstruation. Like the whole story is a cycle. It's like a cycle. Okay. It has to do with the idea of when love is ready. Like, when is it time to join with the male? And it comes after death, Yeah. And so for people who don't know, like it's related to the story of Jairus' daughter in Scripture.
Okay.
The story of Jairus' daughter is actually a little version of Snow White, for those who don't know. The story of Jairus' daughter is about menstruation, folks. It's not just about menstruation, but it is about menstruation, because Jesus comes off the boat, and then Jairus comes and says, my daughter is sick, would you come and help her?
Yeah.
And then she's 12 years old.
Okay,
come and help her, right? And so he takes her away, and then this woman comes, and she's bleeding. She's been bleeding for 12 years, right? So this 12-year-old girl needs help, and then this woman has been bleeding for 12 years. So Christ heals her bleeding, then comes to Jairus' daughter who's dead, and he resurrects her, like the prince resurrects Snow White, and then she eats and moves on with her life. And so it's like, that's what it's about. Like, some aspect of it, let's say. It's about the right time, you could say, and also the understanding what the cycle, of femininity, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, folks.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, we're Catholics who don't use contraception and know all about when the peak time to.
Yeah, so there you go. So that's definitely part of what the story is about. Like when it's the right time, and it's after death, you could say. Yeah, but it's also a deeper story about resurrection in general. Like it's about it is about how it's about baptism. It's about resurrection. It's about all of these things. Like it's not just about sex, obviously, and neither is the story of Jairus' daughter. The story of Jairus' daughter is about using the image of the bleeding and impurity and of the falling as a sign for sickness and death, so that Christ then raises up after that cycle. It's like that's also what it's about.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad I asked you that question. Hey, let me ask you about this new series that Daily Wire is putting out about the Gospels.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all did the Exodus thing. Can I be honest with you? I'm going to be. I opened it up and I just got so anxious seeing that many people around the table. I'm like, oh gosh.
Did you watch it or no?
I haven't. Not yet. No, I want to. I will.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just like, oh gosh, what's that like? I mean, there's that many people. Are you told just everyone needs to let everyone speak? Or?
No, it's actually quite beautiful. I do feel like both in the Exodus series and in the Gospel series that we reach this kind of nice symphonic play where people build on each other's interaction, and there's no one pontificating, like there's no one kind of getting out of control. I didn't feel that during the series. And so for that reason, I think just for that reason alone, it's worth watching, because in some ways it does model what conversation can be and what's possible. And the Gospel series, it's really surprising, I would say. I was scared. Everybody was kind of worried, because Exodus is one thing, but the Gospels is something else. You take the most touchy book. Like if you had to choose, what is the most touchy story that would be the most controversial? And around the table, we had Christians, we had secular people, we had Dennis Prager who was there, and it's like, what's going to happen? And the result is actually quite astounding. I was really surprised. So I think it's worth it. For sure, in my experience, it was worth it. I actually, during the talks, like just discussing, going through the entire story, and it was a crazy idea to do that. Let's go through the whole story of Jesus, man. That's nuts. But so we did it, and we went through, and then I had some insights, like crazy things that I'd never understood in Scripture. All of a sudden, just lit up for me. And I think that'll happen for the people watching it too. So,
what was the experience like? I mean, Daily Wire, did they fly you to a place? Is there any kind of preparation? How do you?
No, we just sit around the table.
You show up and
we just sit around the table. In some ways,
presumably you've become reacquainted with the Scriptures.
To some extent, yes, and to some extent, no. In some ways, one of the things that makes a conversation interesting is that around the table, we had Bishop Barron there for most of the gospel.
Good.
And, myself and a few other, like James Orr, for example, people who know the Scripture really well. And then you had people there that didn't really know like Dennis Prager didn't know the Gospels that well.
Yeah.
And John Vervaeke had learned them as a child, but didn't know them very well. We had like Konstantin Kissin there for a while. He's like, he didn't know the script, and actually the interplay between all of those characters ended up being really powerful, because you get the perspective of someone who's almost discovering it for the first time. Then you also have the wisdom of a Bishop Barron who just cuts right in, right, and just opens it up for you. And so it's actually, I thought it was really an amazing experience,
Yeah. Did you have people subbing in and out, or was it the same group of people for the whole?
So we had some people leave and come in, and it was mostly due to schedule.
Was Barron there the whole time?
No. I mean, man, getting Bishop Barron for 8 days, that's
how long it was.
That's crazy.
It was 8 days.
It was I think it was 7 days plus one. It was around 8 days, if I remember. It was a lot. And so it was all, the fact that he even gave us, I think it was 3 or 4 days, was, to me, was amazing. He's a bishop, for goodness sake. And he runs an entire media empire. It's wild that he was able to do that. But it was great to have him, for sure. Yeah. It's great to have him.
Yeah. He's wonderful, Barron. I'm so grateful for what he's doing. Yeah.
It's definitely worth it, folks. And then if you want to know, we're already kind of working on it. I probably should announce it. But the next one will be probably the only thing that could be more controversial than the gospel.
Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Cliffhanger. Well, I loved your End of the World series that you did.
Cool.
I found that wonderful. Really did. In fact, that's what led me to reach out to you and beg you to come on my show. Yeah, this idea that you talked about, and you can say this better than I'm going to, but like at New Year's, people will get dressed up as kind of, and you're like, this is the end of a year, and like if you start seeing this kind of chaos, it's the end of a world. People should really go and watch that.
Yeah.
Subscribe to Daily Wire. Check it out. It's really good.
Plugging that. Yeah.
And they did an excellent job with the editing.
Yeah, they did really well. I was really happy with it. No, I was happy. It was, it was great. It was a great experience. And also, I think that we also kind of need to understand that, especially what you said, like understand the carnival a little, because, we see the world is becoming a carnival. We're like, why? What's happening? Why is everything becoming so garish and so upside down? And I think there are ways to understand that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was really good. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I might have some more water.
Yeah. Oh,
I have a couple ideas. It wouldn't go in the show, but I can pitch it to you real quick.
Okay.
Notre Dame's reopening next week,
Okay.
so maybe we could have him give us like
Oh.
90-ish seconds on Notre Dame that I could,
Sure.
you can go for as long as he wants, but I would definitely love to at
And
least get a
whiskey,
short out of that.
Yeah.
And then you guys were talking about St. Ephrem, so if you could say your favorite couple of St. Ephrem quotes and then look dead down the camera and go, hey, get off your phone, nerd.
Okay. Sure. I can do
You know what
both
I mean?
those things.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Notre Dame
Yeah.
is reopening. I don't actually know what it's going to look like or how
It
that.
seems it's mostly good.
Yeah.
The pictures I've seen are mostly good.
Wow.
There's one glaring exception, which is that weird altar they put there. Have you seen the altar? It's kind of weird, but we shouldn't talk about that. We should say that it's actually surprising that they made it so faithful to the original.
Did you think it was going
I was
to
really
be?
worried.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
goodness,
am
was I
still. I
worried.
haven't seen the photos.
I mean,
but
did you see some of the plans for it at the outset? It was like, we're going to make it into like a media space with like projections and stuff. It was crazy. But luckily,
this
the
it?
better. Yeah.
thank
Yeah,
you.
that's the weird altar.
Yeah. But see how,
Oh, come on. Piss off. That person should be excommunicated 100%. That is disgusting.
yeah. And so, but the rest is beautiful. Like they redid,
You're gonna get more
Oh.
angry. I want that.
they redid the vaulted arches everywhere. So I hope, I can't wait to go. It's so bad. It's kind of too bad because I went to Paris last year with my kids, and it's like, we can go to Notre Dame. It kind of sucks,
I don't know if you've been to the church just outside where Joan of Arc was killed,
No.
but it's an ugly ass church. It is just disgusting.
Is it modern?
Oh yeah.
Well,
It's
because she was canonized very
awful.
recently, right? That's why. Yeah. When did she canonized in the 19th or 20th?
I don't know. You're the Catholic. You should know.
I'm French. I should know, right?
Yeah, right. So are these are renderings, hey? Like 3D animations? Is that the idea?
That is what's in there, though, I think.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. I don't know why the church doesn't just admit that we made a mistake and start facing east again. This is bothering me.
Yeah, but the truth is that, I'm a short-term pessimist, but I'm a long-term optimist, because
I like that.
it's the truth will prevail. There's no way around it because it's what's true. It's in the sense that it's actually what forms the world. And it'll happen just naturally for the same reason that your parents took out the shag carpeting because it was garish and ridiculous. For the same reason, it's like these ridiculous fashions that appeared in religious architecture in the 20th century, they will be forgotten, because when people visit a city, they don't visit those churches.
Yeah.
Even the tourists go to the old churches. Why? Because it's objectively better.
It's like the fairy tales, right?
Yeah.
So like these new modern churches are the new Snow White that no one's going to be interested in.
And it's not something that it's like it happens really at a how can I say it? It happens just over one generation. So it's like, what do you care about? What do you want to transmit? What do you want to preserve? Because the idea that things just stay, they don't. Things get destroyed really fast. If you don't maintain things, they disappear quite rapidly. You can just go to like some of the ruins of Christian churches in Turkey and realize that it doesn't take long if you don't have someone actually preserving some of these churches that they just basically fall apart. And so in this case, it's good because all of these horrible like more modern churches will just vanish. Even as the church shrinks, like as the Catholic Church shrinks, there'll be an effort. They'll have to decide which buildings to keep, and they won't keep the ugly ass buildings.
I hope not.
I hope not.
I mean, it might be like Disney going all in on ugly because
or maybe Yeah, because
idiots.
it's less expensive. That's the
Could be
dangerous
that.
part, is that because it's less expensive, they might
I
go for
do
the
see. I
ugly.
do see an uptick. Like I'm actually really optimistic about the state of the church. You know, like Bishop Barron, like there's good men. There are good men who are giving their lives to the priesthood, and it takes a while. I don't know how long it takes for us to see starlight,
Yeah.
but there are things happening in the church right now that are so good. And what we're seeing right now isn't really what's happening right now.
Yeah,
it's what happened
it's-
years ago.
No, you're right.
And what we
that's
will
true.
see.
I think that's true, and I think that at some point, it's this is the purification that is. It's you see how natural it is in some ways, because as people leave the church, the people that will stay, ultimately, maybe not for again a little while, but the people that will stay will be the people that actually care.
Want to be there.
Because the boomers might have been cynical, and you might have had a bunch of cynical boomer priests that really were there to destroy, even if they didn't totally understand it. But it's like once things start to shake, why would the younger people stay? There's no reason.
How did Orthodoxy, it seems to me as an outsider, like not go down this stupid road?
Haha. Well,
I don't mean to give Orthodoxy too much credit.
but I would say decentralization is probably one of the aspects, because in some ways, it did almost go that way. If you think of the way that
I'm
Peter
sure
the Great,
there are,
in Russia,
okay.
things got crazy in Russia with Peter the Great, and the turning the church into a state church, and then kind of moving towards, wacky stuff leading to the revolution. There were some scary moments in Greece too. There were some scary moments, but I would say that in the end, luckily the ground didn't move. It's also difficult. The centralization offers a great opportunity, which is you can act effectively, and you can be pretty
screw it up
efficient
quickly too.
Exactly. That's also the problem.
Yeah.
And so in Orthodoxy, we can't even have a synod. We can't. And I thank God all the time that we didn't. It's like I actually don't want a synod.
Yeah, because a synod is a meeting.
Please, let's not
Meetings
have a synod.
They do way more damage.
And so it's like let's just and so in some ways our qualities and faults have been part of the preservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gideon says, ask for his comments on the political state of Canada. It's bloody brutal up here. So he's a Canadian wanting to know what's going on in Canada.
Man. Yeah, you don't know what's going on in Canada? It seems like...
No, I live in America now. We're only interested in us. Everyone else is interested in us as well.
You don't have to see Justin.
My family are writing to me, talking to me about American politics.
You don't have to see Justin
What's going on with him? It doesn't seem like people like him anymore.
They don't. I think he has the lowest approval rate in the history of prime ministers that we know. Yeah, but he doesn't care. And so hopefully that he will just go. Hopefully he'll go.
Can you explain to me it's not like a 4-year term. So how does this work?
Oh, it's a parliamentary system, right? Yeah. And so we don't have a president, which means that the prime minister, Justin Trudeau, is in parliament. He's arguing with the opposition. He's not at all like a presidential figure. We tend to compare them.
Yeah.
Nobody votes for the prime minister.
Right. It's the same in Australia.
Yeah. You vote
for the party.
For your representative. And then that representative is in a party, and whichever party has the most seats will have the prime minister. Like the head of the party will be the prime minister. And so, it's like, it's good because he's constantly being humiliated, in parliament because the Liberal Party is corrupt beyond belief, and because of all the crazy things they've done. And now they're saying. Now, all of a sudden, Justin Trudeau's like, well, we're going to pull back on immigration now. It's like, you moron. Like, what have you done? It's like, you just irresponsibly just let things happen. And now nobody can afford a house anymore. It's like the system is crashing. Everything is like, prices are through the roof. Everything is just out of control. Really? And he's just like, it's all good. Let's have a carbon tax. He's like they're trying to have a carbon tax now.
That breaks my heart because I love Canada.
Yeah, well, we have hope. I mean, it's
such a beautiful country.
I think that in some ways there's going to be a reckoning, and possibly the next election will be that.
So do you sense a lot of like here in America, the whole Let's Go Brandon bumper stickers, and it was very clear all over the place that I looked that people thought this guy's got to go.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Well, we had it during the trucker convoy. There was
Yeah.
a little bit of that, and we kind of, it was really a shift. Like the trucker convoy was a major shift in culture because, the media just demonized them like crazy.
Yeah.
I was there. I went to Ottawa for the protest, and it was beautiful. Like it was difficult. I imagine people in Ottawa didn't like the horns going forever. I understand that was difficult, but like it wasn't violent at all. It was like really. And it was just regular people, like really regular Joes, like working
freaking
people.
love regular people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're the salt of the earth, right? Like they're like the ground on which we stand. You mess with, regular people will go a long ways before they start to grumble. Like they'll take a lot actually. But when if you watch out for like just the regular guys that just want to live their life, if they start to grumble, man, you pay attention. Because it's going to get messy really fast, And so I think that's one of the things that happened during the trucker convoy. And so hopefully that will play out in the next election.
When is the next election?
I think it's in the fall, 2025.
And so
we still have a year.
You can vote for a different party and Trudeau will be out. Is that the idea?
Yeah. But the thing is that we could... This is the problem. How much into Canadian politics do you want me to go? And so this is the problem. The problem is that in the parliamentary system, you can call an election, right? So you don't just wait 4 years. So what Trudeau did is during COVID, he called an election, which was really smart. It was strategic because like everybody's afraid, everybody's scared. And then he called an election. And so then they reelected him for 4 years. And that's what's going to run out.
Just call election whenever?
Yeah. The party that's in charge can call an election whenever. But
do they have to call an election? Can they not call an
every
election?
4 years they have to.
They have to, but they
in
can do it
between the
within
4
that
years
time.
they can call an election if they feel that they have the
upper ground.
Yeah,
And
but also
can
they
go
have to be
another
careful
4
because
years,
nobody
yeah.
likes an election, and so it's like you can't just keep calling elections because people are going to get annoyed with you. And so he did that, and it was like, that's not. Everybody was annoyed with him that he did that, even though they still came in. He thought that he would have majority. That's why he called an election, but he didn't. He got a minority again. So then it was like, so what he did is he created a coalition with the far left party, the NDP, and another party. It's complicated. It's called the Bloc in Quebec, and so they have the majority. The Conservatives, they as a bloc, they have the majority, right? But the Liberals themselves don't have the majority, so they're a minority government. And so the head of the Conservative Party has been pushing for an election now. He's like, because if you have a vote in Parliament, you can vote a non-confidence vote. And if you have a non-confidence vote in the government, then it automatically triggers an election.
Okay.
And he tried to do that, but he failed because the coalition held.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope that the momentum can continue. If the momentum continues, then the Conservative sweep for sure.
Really? Did you think Trump was going to win?
It's weird because I thought, in 2016, I didn't think Trump was going to win. And then in 2020, I thought Trump was going to win. And then in 2024, I was like, I don't know, man. I have no idea. I
give
have
up guessing.
no idea.
Well, a shout out to Josiah because back in the day, this was shortly after, this was during the primaries, right? Where all the Republicans were running, DeSantis and all of them. And
2023, first Republican primary.
he said to me, Trump's going to win again. I'm like, there's no way he's going to win again.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? But
for sure, like when they... when they attacked him legally, and when they indicted him,
and then like actually attacked him by shooting him in
and then when they shot
face.
him, I was like,
That's wild.
yeah, the indicting and the convicting, I would have all of a sudden I was like, if I was American, I would vote for Trump every day, just because of that, just because they weaponized the legal system against the former president. I was like, he has to be president. I didn't know if it was possible. And then when they shot him, I was like, my goodness. Seriously.
Someone said, I forget who it was who said, like, we're all just like, in a Trump story. This is Trump's story. We're all just like B actors in the background.
It's weird because it's like,
he's got to win.
It's like, it's so weird because I never really particularly liked him as a person, but at the same time.
I don't know. I really like him.
Yeah?
I just think he's great. I'm pumped about him. And I understand that's naive.
I like JD Vance.
And to be nuanced seems a lot cooler, but I don't care. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. Yeah. I'm happy. Like I stayed up, at first I was like, they're not going to announce this for a week. And I'm
know,
going
so
to
I
bed.
thought.
So I was kind of staying up. I was on my computer, I was kind of watching the commentary, and I'm like, wait a minute,
what the hell is happening?
This is happening.
I was watching the Daily Wire stream, and I think it was Jordan Peterson who said to Ben Shapiro, like, you're terrifying when you're happy. Like,
Ben Shapiro was the funniest
That was
man in the
amazing.
world. He was so funny. I was just
good.
like, I was cracked up the whole time. It's like
I hope someone's put together a video of that. I want to watch it again.
I didn't think he could be that funny.
He was
He
delightful.
was hilarious. Yeah. That was funny. Yeah, I was watching it too because Jordan was there, and I was like, I'll watch the Daily Wire and see. But then Ben Shapiro was hilarious. It was funny. Yeah. So I would say that, I'm kind of, I'm somewhat hopeful, like, that there'll be like some kind of reprieve. I think so. I like JD Vance. I think if he's the future of the party, I appreciate that. I'm definitely a little worried that in some ways we just elected Bill Clinton and like we're all cheering about it. It's like, that's a little, it's like he's not a Republican. He's not a conservative. He's basically like a 90s Democrat.
No, I think like we're experiencing in this country on one end of the spectrum, like complete and utter despair. And then also sort of like euphoric jubilation. I think neither are probably good.
Yeah,
right. Christ is king. He is our
That's right.
hope.
That's for sure.
And we got to keep that in mind. But I mean, just to have the boot off our throat for a bit might
it
be
does
nice.
feel like that. It does feel like that because we've seen now people back off from some of the madness. It's like
already.
And even though Biden seems to, not Biden, whatever, whoever's in charge seems to be doing everything so that World War III starts before Trump gets in. We've already seen Zelensky said that he has some terms that he's willing to discuss with Trump. And it's like, that's hopeful. And, it's like, let's just hope the world doesn't blow up before that, because it seems like there's some people who really want that to happen. It's just weird. It's weird. Why do people want nuclear war? What the hell is happening? What is this desire for nuclear war? I don't understand it. I do not understand. Like,
is it a desire for that? Or is it a desire just to get ahead without maybe wanting to fully look at the consequences? Or to...
I don't know what it is. I don't totally understand it. It's like, I was a child in the 80s. I remember the Cold War. Like, I remember the fear of nuclear war, but it's like now nobody seems to care. Everybody's like, Putin might use nuclear weapons.
I don't think we know what nuclear war means or entails. Maybe we need to re-educate ourselves so we can be a little more afraid. What is that thing that Strider says to Frodo? Are you afraid? You're not nearly afraid enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we should be afraid. That's for sure.
This has been so fun. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Flying out, first of all, because flying is the worst. Yeah.
Well, I thought I have to meet this guy in person. The Zoom calls, you just don't do it.
Zoom sucks. Yeah. It is interesting how more and more people seem to be doing in-person interviews. I mean, obviously, I'm ripping off Joe Rogan by doing this, and I've been doing this for years now. But I've noticed more and more people are moving away from the Zoom thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm still on the Zoom. I mean, it's a lot of logistics.
I could get a lot more people on. I mean, Dave Ramsey just said he'd come on my show if we could do it by Skype. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Dave Ramsey. I'll probably end up saying yes. But right now, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to sit with a human being and have a whiskey and have there's something beautiful about that. What do you have on the docket? What's coming up?
What's coming up? And so, we're focusing on these books. That's what the big focus for me is trying to get these fairy tales out. And also this graphic novel, God's Dog. We've started doing courses on the symbolic world because I think people need, because I just talk and, I talk about things, but I think people want more deep dives. And so we did a course on the Divine Comedy. We did two with Richard Rowland, one of the people I podcast with. Okay. And also Martin Shaw came and did a class on that. So that's one of the things we're doing. We're noticing people get excited about that. People want to a little deeper. And so that's kind of the next step, I think. Yeah.
And the Daily Wire stuff on the side.
Yeah. Once in a while, it's fun.
Now, how does it work with Peterson? Does he just call you up? It's like, I'm going to need you in
Yeah, pretty much.
Guam.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like the thing with Jordan is like, everything so many things he brings up are like just so amazing, and so it's been great. So for example, like there's ARC in February. I don't know if you know about ARC.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but someone invited me. They said you invited me. Maybe you didn't because you don't think you remember.
I did invite you. So are you
I'm
coming?
so grateful. I just don't know if I want to. So I'm not going to. No.
Okay.
I just think
You should come.
it sounds great, but I have things I'm doing, and it's time away from the family.
I understand.
But I'm very grateful for the. So tell us what that is. I mean,
And so basically-
is it an invite only thing, or what is it?
It is an invite only thing for now. In some ways, it's trying to.
And are you running that? Is that
No,
your?
not me. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the board, but I'm not running it. It's basically it's independent, although Jordan is heavily involved. In some ways, it's trying to create an alliance. It's called Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, but in some ways, it's an alliance
This is gonna be funny.
to counter the globalist narrative.
I'm gonna ask my assistant, our manager, right now why I'm not going, and she's gonna write back, and we're gonna play it live and see what happens. Hey Mel, remember how Jonathan Pageau invited me to this ARC thing? I'm just wondering, what was the reason I'm not going again? We'll see if she gets that. And then we're going to play it live without telling her. Who knows what she'll say? She might be like, you said Jonathan was an asshole.
Yeah, no, exactly.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't record it if you thought you said that. But in some ways, it basically the basic idea is to open up the Overton window.
Yeah.
And try to like prevent the drift that we've seen happening obviously for the last 20, 30 years, where, it's like there's certain things you can't talk about anymore, like the environmental narrative has become completely anti-human, the narrative about sexuality has been completely anti-family, like all of these drifts that have been pushed us away. And so it's kind of trying to like reorient people towards,
She's watching. She's about to respond. This is going to be great. Or it could be just very boring.
Yeah, it could be just boring.
Just
You're just
really-
busy. You wanted to stay with the family. Maybe she'll compliment you.
Schizo energy?
She'll
yeah,
say-
if you
she'll-
need...
She'll
Yeah,
say,
Siri,
she'll
great.
say,
Hello, I think it is the week after you get back from Australia. Africa. Is it the summer? It's when you right when you get back from Africa, so you'll have been gone for 3 weeks, and then
Is it Africa? Is it in July, I mean?
for a week out,
August?
and you
No, it's in
leave your family.
February.
Yeah, it's because I get back from Australia.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm so grateful. I'm getting to go I don't know when this will release, but it'll probably be around that time. I get last week of January, first week of February, I'm in Australia getting to evangelize. I'm so grateful to go
Okay.
home. So I think it was like, it's either overlapped or something.
yeah. So that's what it is. And so
That was
basically,
way more of an explanation that you needed
Yeah,
for why I'm not coming. I could have just went like, I couldn't make it. Sorry.
But you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Is all I'm saying.
What's the dates again?
It's I forget the date. They're
Well,
late
you know
in
what it
February.
is too. I think it's because I'm gone that long that I'm recording a bunch. I'm still explaining it. I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's basically it's the idea of gathering people together and to create an umbrella.
Yeah.
So that people can talk about things that they haven't been able to talk about. So we've actually seen progress, not just because of ARC, but some of the people involved in ARC, where, for example, you notice that the Democrats didn't use the environmental narrative at all during the election.
Yeah. Now I do.
That's right. It's because the needle has already shifted, right? Where people are
And they also weren't being like, what if we had women in men and women's sports?
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing either.
exactly. And so I think that we've already, it's not just ARC, obviously, but ARC is playing a role even through the people that are coming together to kind of open up the possibility of talking about things. And so, the idea, for example, that we have a kind of kids first idea and this like family first idea where we say that this is the ideal. Like the ideal is a family with a father and a mother and children, and that is the fullest vision of what can underlie society. And we understand that there are exceptions. We understand that there are people that can't fit that, and that we need compassion and understanding for that. But that we can't, take away the ideal, for the exception. And so that type of approach for many, many fields, trying to kind of, and also bring the people together, because a lot of people, it's going to be different now, but a lot of people for several years felt lonely. It's like, I think differently from the main narrative, but
Yes.
I don't, if I say it, I'm in danger. My life is in danger. And so if we can provide cover for people so that there's space for them to speak, I think we could move the needle to some extent. So that's what ARC is for. Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing that. That's it, dude. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks
You're
to
awesome.
you. This was fun. A lot of fun.
That was lovely. Thank you.